Elsewhere, it's a fine winter's day, a real change compared with what we're experiencing through Friday. Now, Saturday evening does bring this weather front in the west further east, and it's going to be a gusty feature with some heavy rain for a time, perhaps some thunder. It does move through, and then on Sunday, a fine start, again a cold start, before more wind and rain move in from the southwest later.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Imagine how £50,000 in cash from us could make your new year go with a bang.
Hi, my name's Victoria. I won the Spring Great British giveaway. So the day we got the money in our bank account, everything just felt a lot lighter. I would say if you're thinking about entering, just enter.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Very, very good afternoon to you. It's 3 p.m. Welcome to the Moss and Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. In a huge victory for sexual abuse survivors, Labour-ran Wigan councillors defied Keir Starmer and voted for a full national inquiry into rape gangs. I'll be joined by the heroic independent councillor who refused to be silenced. And might this be a nationwide tipping point? It's been described as the worst storm of the century. Storm Ewan batters Britain, with hurricane-force winds expected to reach up to 100 miles an hour in some parts of the country. Our reporters will be live. And today, Waitrose became the latest supermarket to throw their weight behind British farmers in what will be another massive embarrassment for under-fire Chancellor Rachel Reeves. On today's show, I'll be joined by British farmers who say they've picked on the wrong target. And a Croydon man who stopped a stabbing rampage, a campaigner who GB News helped to raise £100,000 in just 4 hours yesterday for the survivors of the Southport murder rampage. Today, celebrates the very, very best of great British heroes, because in these dark times, don't we all need a wonderful, good news story? That's all coming. So I want to start today's show with this amazing story. It's one of those great British heroes, Joseph. He confronted a man in a balaclava at the scene of a mass stabbing in Croydon yesterday. Have a look at this.
More seriously injured, yeah, luckily. I don't know how, because he tried to stab me about 20 times, but I've managed to get away with a little slight stuff.
Where have you been stabbed?
Just on my finger there.
Okay.
It weren't too bad, though.
And who bandaged that up? The police?
The police did, yeah. I'm gonna get...
Sorry, do you mind just really quickly, mate, because I've just come to sort of halfway through. What's happened here? You were one of the people who was inside the warehouse?
Yeah, so he was basically stabbing people in a warehouse, at which point we had locked ourselves in an office, and I said, it sounded like they were getting killed, so we decided to open the door and go and help them, because it sounded like they were in trouble. At which point he turned around and sprinted towards us, and then got halfway in the door before I could shut it, and then was stabbing at me like that.
What kind of knife did he have?
Like a Rambo knife.
Joseph, if you're out there, mate, please come on the show, or just say hello. I want to buy you a pint. You're a hero. This geezer tried to stab you with a Rambo knife 20 times. You locked yourself in a room. You could have stayed there. You didn't want to stay there. You came out and you charged at him. You got injured in the process. You know, after what happened in Southport, we heard those amazing victim impact statements yesterday. People risking their lives to save children. You've done the same, Joseph. We need more people like you in the country. Hats off to you. You total legend. Get in touch. Get on the show, or at least let me buy you a beer. Get in touch. And here's how you do it, Joseph. It's gbnews.com/your say. But now here's your headlines with Sophia Hill.
Thank you, Martin. The top stories. Storm Eowyn is sweeping across the UK, bringing record-breaking winds and severe weather conditions. 1 in 5 flights from airports in the UK and Ireland have been cancelled today, and millions of people urged to stay home. Forecasters have flagged a rare threat-to-life red weather warning, and over 4 million people across Northern Ireland and Scotland received emergency alerts from the Met Office last night, with guidance on how to stay safe. More than 240,000 homes and businesses are without power in Northern Ireland, and a wind speed of 114 miles per hour brought by the storm has been recorded in Ireland, the fastest since records began. 20,000 Scottish Power customers across the south of the country are without electricity, and a danger to life warning for wind has been extended in Scotland, where more than 35,000 properties have lost power. Local authorities have warned commuters to avoid travel at all costs. And the Southport child killer will likely die behind bars after murdering 3 girls at a dance class. But his 52-year sentence has sparked calls for law changes. Axel Rudikabana received one of the highest minimum custody terms on record for the attack in Southport in July last year, when he was 17 years old. Alistair Silva Aguirre, BB King and Elsie Stankham were all killed, and harrowing details of the attack were heard at Liverpool Crown Court yesterday. However, Southport's Labour MP Patrick Hurley said the sentence was not severe enough, and he asked the Attorney-General to review it as unduly lenient. Due to Rudikabana's age at the time of the attack, he cannot legally receive a whole-life order. The head of the UK's largest police force has welcomed a review of contempt of court laws and said it would be great if more information in cases could be shared at an earlier stage. Defence Secretary John Healey told GB News Axel Rudikabana did not get a whole-life sentence because international laws had prevented it.
The technicality of the whole life sentences, I think it's important to know that the last government did reduce it to 18 in line with international law after the Manchester Arena bombings, and that still stands. There are a range of other aspects of law, of agencies who have failed in this case to step in. They knew about this man's extreme violence, but they failed to take any steps that might have prevented it. And there may be changes also in the programmes that are designed to deal with this sort of extremism. That's what the inquiry now, the court case has finished, which was launched this week, will do.
Meanwhile, a deal worth around £9 billion has struck with Rolls-Royce by the government to help power Britain's nuclear submarines. The 8-year contract, dubbed Unity, is aimed at safeguarding 4,000 jobs and creating over 1,000 more, as well as bolstering national security and the UK economy. Defence Secretary John Healey said the agreement showed defence can be used as an engine for growth and a commitment to Britain's nuclear deterrent. The ministry estimates it'll save more than £400 million over the full 8-year period by making delivery more efficient and offering incentives to produce more for no increase in costs. Wigan Council has voted for a national inquiry into grooming gang scandals, breaking with the Labour government's position. The local authority, which is Labour-led, unanimously voted through a motion requesting that a full national inquiry is undertaken. The motion said the abuse had destroyed the lives of tens of thousands of teenage girls, adding that an inquiry would provide justice for the young girls who have suffered and identify preventative measures moving forward. Hamas is expected to hand over to Israel the names of 4 hostages to be released under the Gaza ceasefire deal tomorrow. It's thought they'll be soldiers and civilians, all female. The terror group says it'll be in exchange for 180 Palestinian prisoners and detainees who are being held by Israel. It'll be the second exchange since the ceasefire came into effect last Sunday. 3 hostages and 90 prisoners were released in the first swap. A mother whose 4 young boys died in a fire after she left them home alone to go to the supermarket has been jailed for 10 years. Devika Rose left her 2 sets of twins in the locked terrace house when the fatal blaze broke out on the evening of the 16th of December 2021. Jurors were told the 4 children died after a discarded cigarette or upturned tea light sparked a blaze at the family house in South London. The 30-year-old, who suffered from mental health problems, was found guilty of 4 counts of manslaughter following trial. Rose and the children had been living in squalor before the tragedy. And 2 giant pandas have made their public debut at the Smithsonian's National Zoo in Washington, D.C. A zoo volunteer says Bao Li, a male whose name translates to active and vital power, and King Bao, a female whose name means green and treasure, have already won the hearts of our staff and volunteers. The pandas, both 3 years old, make their much welcome return after a 15-month absence. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More in half an hour.
Thank you, Sophia. Beautiful. Now, an embarrassment for Sir Keir Starmer, a major one, as a cabinet member's constituency has sensationally voted for a national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal. The Labour-led Wigan Council broke with the government's position following Stockton Council also earlier on today. Later on, I'll be joined by the councillor Morin O'Burn, who put forward the motion, and I cannot look forward to that. Not all heroes wear capes, and some of them are called Maureen. But for now, here's GB News' reporter Charlie Peters, who broke this story. Charlie, another magnificent victory for this cause of just making sure we have sunlight as the best form of bleach. Council by council, we are getting somewhere. This is a significant embarrassment for the Labour Party because, of course, not only have they defied the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, but also a Cabinet Minister. Lisa Nandy is the local MP. Nevertheless, a fantastic piece of news. Tell us more.
Well, Martin, yes, as you've said, this is a Labour-run council breaking with the government position. And you've also mentioned Lisa Nandy there, the MP for Wigan. This is a Greater Manchester Authority area. So the additional significance there is that Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Manchester, came out for a limited inquiry after the government voted down that Conservative amendment that would have put forward a national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal when that happened earlier this month in Parliament on the 8th of January. So what we've seen today, actually, is the second attempt by independent councillor Morin O'Burn to bring this motion into Wigan Council's chambers. What happened on Wednesday is that this motion was the 5th of several that were up for debate at the full council meeting in the evening, but we're told by the council that it reached its time limit, it couldn't be heard. But Morin O'Burn, it seems, stood up and started reading her speech for this motion regardless, with many councillors leaving the chamber at the time. I'm told that at least one Labour councillor did sit behind and listen to Maureen as she delivered that motion, wanting it to be debated on. And before the vote today, all the Labour councillors, again, voted against having that motion being debated. It just went straight to a vote, which was upheld unanimously by all councillors. 64 Labour, 10 Independent, 1 Tory. All of those present within those numbers voting unanimously in favour of it. I'm also told that a couple of Labour councillors abstained from the vote against having this motion debated. I'm told by Morin O'Burn, that independent councillor, that she's tried to raise the issue of grooming gangs regularly in the town and in the town's chamber, but she's always felt that she's been drawn away from attempts to do so. But let's look at the wider significance here, Martin. As you've referred, there have already been those votes in Stockton in favour of a grooming gangs investigation. That was voted down in favour 29 to 21. It's a Labour-run authority, but they are actually the minority party there. So actually it's the independents and the Conservatives putting that one forward and ensuring that one was passed. And then in Bradford on Tuesday evening, we saw a vote rejected by that council. But that's a bit different, because the Bradford vote was specifically a local inquiry into issues in the Bradford district, which is a campaign that's been brought forward by the local Tory MP Robbie Moore for Keighley and Ilkley for many years. He's been campaigning for that, but rejected in that chamber. But yet there have now been several votes on this issue in council chambers, and some problems for the government here, Martin, as you're seeing Labour-run authorities voting in favour of statutory national investigations, very much against the government's position.
And Charlie Peters, it's a significant victory, although, as you said, Labour councillors disgracefully walked out when Morin was trying to speak. She also tried to issue a statement in this debate there. She wasn't allowed to do that. I've got that statement here. It is, of course, some of the most harrowing evidence, Charlie Peters, as you know, from the Oxford rape gang trial. The extracts, actually, that woke the entire world up to this, including Elon Musk, with you pushing this forward. We've got Morin O'Burn on the show later on. I'm very, very excited to speak with her. And Charlie Peters, you know, it feels like something is happening. It feels like the tide has turned. It feels like perhaps, hopefully, fingers crossed, everything crossed, now the dam is finally beginning to break.
Well, Martin, there has been a change in tone from several people within the government. We heard from the Prime Minister's spokesperson right after that vote was rejected in Parliament, when the spokesperson said that the Prime Minister was open to the issue. We've also heard in that announcement made a couple of weeks ago, when the government was pushing for 5 more local inquiries, that they would be led on what the survivors demanded. So there was definitely an easing of their original position that we revealed on the 1st of January, which showed that they'd rejected a call for a government-led inquiry into Oldham specifically. Some thought that we could be tiptoeing towards a national inquiry, and that actually what was happening here was Labour was building its own position, so they weren't to be seen to be reacting to pressure from Elon Musk and others. But other people close to the situation in Number 10 have told me that that's not the case, that Labour is not seeking to change its position. The government won't stray from its current stance in favour of local inquiries. But what we're seeing now, Martin, is that so many of those local areas are voting for national inquiries. They're voting for statutory inquiries, because they know, as the government must surely know also, that only when you can compel witnesses and force people to give evidence and be questioned and be grilled can you get justice for survivors. It's not enough just to go after perpetrators, they say. There are also guilty men and women right across the country who covered up these crimes, who also need to face prosecution.
OK, well, Charlie, let's just have a little look at that clip of Morin O'Burn attempting to speak when the Labour councillors, I think, disgracefully walked out. Let's have a look at that now.
Yeah, pretty significant incident, that, Martin. They say, the Wigan Council have said that it reached a guillotine, which means that there was outstanding business remaining on the agenda. That's their term, they say. So 3 hours the council meeting had been taken on, and that came to an end. We're told that the meeting was disrupted and subsequently adjourned. But Morin O'Burn, the Speaker who was delivering that motion, has told me that that's very much not how she sees it, and that there was plenty of time to debate her motion again today, but it wasn't even read out. It was just voted. She says that she has every respect for the leader of the opposition group, a councillor called James Watson, who pushed forward demands for this vote as well. But the council are describing Morin O'Burn's speech there as an outburst. She told me that she's been objected to speaking on the grooming gangs before, and she said, yet again, we still are not allowed to speak about them today.
Well, I'll tell you what, an absolute victory for Maureen. I'm very, very excited to speak to her later in the show. They tried to silence her. They couldn't. She just wouldn't give up, just like yourself, Charlie Peters. It feels to me, after yesterday, we wanted a good news story. I think this is magnificent. Charlie Peters, speak to you again in the next hour. Wonderful. And we've got a reply here from the leader of Wigan Council, and that's the councillor David Molyneux, and he told GB News this. The motion was carried unanimously, and I'm pleased to support our colleagues at Oldham Council. Our intention was always to support this motion from the outset. I also welcome that the council's leader of the opposition has written to the mayor to apologise for his colleague's outburst that led to the adjournment. That's concluded that meeting. Wonderful. Well done, Maureen, and we'll speak to you shortly. But before that, let's speak to GB News political editor Chris Hope, who joins me in the studio. Chopper, a significant embarrassment there for the Labour Party on the topic of grooming gangs, but you've got a lot of information for me about the fallout from yesterday's Southport sentencing. Of course, Axel Rudick-Cabana. What's the latest?
Well, dominating coverage yesterday and still today here in Westminster. Now, we're expecting the Prevent review next week, that we understand from sources. The government's pushing back against death penalty. We heard at the end of your show yesterday, didn't we? Lee Anderson and Rupert Lowe calling for the death penalty. The government has no plans to bring back capital punishment, the PM's deputy official spokesman told us. They use the example of Ian Brady, who wished to get cancer to end his life early. He was haunted by the memory of his crimes. Why let the person off that is the argument. No plan for a free vote on that. No plans also to extend whole life terms to under 18s. Remember Kevin Babe said you look at that. That won't happen under this government. They say that the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child means they can't do it. Even though we don't think we're legally bound to that, the UN laws are what the government's respecting.
There'll be a lot of people there saying, why are we governed by United Nations as we were Brussels?
And we're not. We are simply abiding by a convention. We're not governed like the ECHR. It's a different relationship with the UN Convention. And the idea of the 52-year minimum sentence handed to the Southport killer, that has now been reviewed by the Attorney General's office. We'll hear back in 28 days on that. And killers and the government's also looking towards this public inquiry, so they're getting there as soon as possible. Okay. So a lot happening there, and elsewhere with my podcast today.
Let's get on that, because you've got a touch of Frost for us, Lord Frost.
That's why we always do talk about Reform UK and the Tories. In general, the issue of the right taking on the Labour government. Lord Frost, of course, is a former Brexit negotiator for Boris Johnson. He's a Tory peer, but he's interesting. Now, he was trying to be an MP for the Tory party at the last election, wasn't able to do that because of various reasons. He has talked to us today about the need for reform and the Tories to come to an arrangement. Either they get stronger, one gets stronger to push the other one to the background. If they can't do it, a deal needs to be done. Here's what Lord Frost had to say to me on the podcast.
Is a merger inevitable between the Reform and the Conservative Party pre-election?
I think, no, I don't think it is inevitable. I think it's possible that one or other party could come out on top and get a decisive lead, and then politics has to accommodate to that. If it doesn't happen, then there's got to be some sort of arrangement or whatever, because we can't allow Labour to win again on a third of the vote. And I personally don't think it's right to rubbish, for Conservatives to rubbish reform figures, or even more so people who voted for reform. And I don't think it's particularly wise for reform to do that either. We need to be building agreement and understanding between each other, not digging the trench even deeper. And there's some signs that's happening, and I don't particularly feel comfortable with it, I must say. Maybe that will be achieved by one party winning out over the other, or maybe it will be through some sort of deal, and it's too soon to be sure yet, I think.
Frost there with a plea not to rubbish each other, Tories and Reform. He thinks one of the two groups will be in the lead of the election, the other one must fall behind. The problem is Kevin Badenoch is against any kind of coming together. She says to me last week in that press conference, Nigel Farage wants to destroy the Tory party. Why would we do a deal with them?
Aren't they destroying the Tory party anyway? Or are the Tories destroying themselves? Is Lord Frost, the great negotiator, going out into the battlefield with the white flag? Is this, we can't coexist, do the Conservative Party need reform more than the other way around at the moment?
Why would you do a deal if you're Reform? You've got you only have 5 MPs, so don't forget, you have 4 million votes, 5 MPs, but you have what's called momentum. They're the party to watch in the polls. Nigel Farage knows that. He'll look at that and go, that sounds maybe, gosh, really, is that in our interest? But I think Frost there is ahead of the curve. He knows, and Suella Braverman has said as much in an interview with The Telegraph earlier this week, some sort of deal has to be done to beat Labour. At some point, these two parties will recognise that the bigger issue is defeating Labour, because they both basically agree on the same areas most of the time.
Isn't it a funny old world? It was no deal with Michel Barnier, but now Mr Brexit's got the red rose between his teeth, trying to get a deal with Nigel Farage.
You get your fang stuck into this one like you, Martin.
But, it is an interesting prospect. Nigel has said no deals. Kemi has said no deals. This is politics.
But round the margins, senior Tories are starting to talk about it. We haven't heard the same yet from Reform UK. It's a smaller cast list, frankly, but look at what's happening. Listen to what they're saying. That's the direction of travel, I think.
Chris, beautiful stuff as ever. See you again in the next hour. Great stuff. Thank you. Now, brace yourselves, because red weather warnings are enforced, with millions of people urged to stay home as the storm batters Blighty. We'll be live from some of the worst hit areas soon, with our reporters clinging on to trees on the edge of cliffs. My favourite part of the day. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Business News Channel.
Nice one, yeah. See you.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
According to a report from the RAC, many drivers see speed limits as a target rather than anything else. More than 50% of us think it's acceptable to break the speed limit.
So this morning we're asking, is it time to increase the motorway speed limit?
Let's talk to automotive journalists Danny Kelly and Steve Fowler. Gents, what a pleasure to speak to you both in one go.
I think we should join many countries in the European Union that have 130 kilometres speed limit, which is around about 81 miles an hour. I drive to London on a weekly basis, and I think the roads are capable of handling higher speeds. I think unofficially the speed limit, without getting pulled over by the local police at the time, is probably around about 78, 80 miles an hour. If a Bobby's on the motorway doing 70 miles an hour, he wants you to overtake him. He wants the free-flowing of that motorway to continue.
So should we change 70 miles an hour? If people are going 80 miles an hour, just stick to 70 miles an hour as a limit. Yes, it's funny when you're driving along the motorway and there's a police car going at 70 and nobody wants to overtake. But if the average is 80, just leave it at 70.
All the gantries now are fitted with the modern signage where they can change the limit at will. We all know that. It's hard to get up to 70 half the time. So, actually, we could apply those rules, couldn't we, at 80 or even 90 miles an hour and say, well, if the weather's bad, let's reduce it. If the fog's bad, let's reduce it.
Yeah, unfortunately, and I hate to use this phrase, smart motorways, but they're the ones where you have the adjustable limits. They don't cover all of the motorway network, relatively small amount of the motorway network. It is a limit. It's not a target, as I keep saying to my kids. God, they're bored of me saying that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:25 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, people in the UK are being urged to stay indoors and avoid travel at all costs. A storm Eowyn, what do you mean Eowyn? Call it Eddie. Who comes at this rubbish? Rolls into town. Well, joining us now is our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie, and our Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire. Let's go to you first, Doogie. Looks pretty calm here. That looks like Tony Maguire's hanging on by his fingernails, but Doogie, looks like it's blown over where you are. What's the latest from Northern Ireland?
Well, you're exactly right, Martin. The worst of it has blown over Northern Ireland. What you're seeing with Tony Maguire and I, we were getting at 7 o'clock this morning. The unfortunate part about that, of course, is that we're now seeing the aftermath, the clean-up of it. All day we've been running about seeing power lines down, leisure centres with roofs of it. And this is a major junction here in Newtown Ards, the North Road. And if we could just get the camera to go down there, it'll show you actually the major junction that this is. And we'll come back to the tree, and of course there is a huge tree across the road behind us, and this tree of course is blocking the place, and unfortunately the council workers didn't come out after the red alert was over, and there's no road or closed signs in any junctions because they're afraid of them blowing away and actually doing more damage. So what you're seeing now is the real problems that are coming after the storm.
Well, Doogie Beattie, if that was in my neighbour's garden, that land, I'd be quite happy it got blown over. Thank you, Doogie Beattie. Let's go now to Tony Maguire there in Scotland. Tony, seems like the gale force is still with you. Tell us more.
The gale force is with you. I like that. Wrong franchise, as we kind of know by now. Eowyn is obviously from Lord of the Rings, but it doesn't make me like this storm any better, let me tell you. And while that has passed over for Northern Ireland, we're on the west coast and, very much still getting the full brunt of this storm, and I think South Lanarkshire, just a little inland, well, they indeed did track those 100-mile-an-hour winds, and as the storm has moved through the central belt, right up through Falkirk and Stirling and across to Edinburgh, well, they're all now feeling the full force of this storm. And we were discussing actually just before going on air there how surreal actually this has been, this storm, because normally these storms actually happen at night for us up in Scotland, saying nothing of the fact that usually they happen a good bit further north in the Highlands. But certainly here in Scotland, much widespread disruption. We've seen ScotRail cancel all rail services today, and indeed into at least midday tomorrow, as well as Glasgow and Edinburgh Airport cancelling and delaying many flights. Still got a few hours of this red weather warning. Make sure I'm still here soon.
Tony Maguire, won't be happy until you're blown into the drink there. Maybe at 5 o'clock, mate, we'll get you blown overboard there. Tony and Doogie Beattie, superb, our intrepid reporters, bracing the elements so you don't have to. Now, for a full nationwide update, let's join the man, the legend, the meteorologist, Mr. Captain John Ketley. John, always an absolute pleasure. So, obviously we can see there, it's blown out its worst in Northern Ireland. Scotland is hanging on by his fingernails. What's the picture nationwide?
Yeah, I'm glad you didn't send me outside, Martin. Thanks very much indeed for that one. It's still blowing quite a bit outside my window here. But yes, the worst has gone from Northern Ireland, but it's still a pretty windy afternoon, and it's pretty stormy still across much of Northern England too. Further south, the winds have really been abating quite quickly in the south of England, and that's ahead of some wetter weather coming through on Sunday. But the main storm is still across Scotland. We've still got this red warning, so I'm dressing appropriately. We've got a red weather warning which covers much of central southern Scotland until 5 o'clock this afternoon. And then we go amber. I'm not going to change my clothing, but it will go amber, which is not quite as severe. But having said that, there will be more snow developing across central northern Scotland later on today and through tonight. So the winds are only easing down slowly in the far north there. And there is a chance of some wintry weather coming back as well. Now, further south, things are going to ease considerably. A much quieter day to come tomorrow. But I was going to tell you, Martin, this is quite normal for the time of the year. Just 12 months ago to the day, we had Storm Jocelyn, which brought winds up to 97 miles an hour in North Wales. Today, we've had 100 miles an hour at Drumalbin in South Lanarkshire, as we've just heard there. And the Glasgow storm back in 1968 occurred in mid-January, and that was devastating. 20-odd people died in that big storm in Glasgow. So the Central Belt is still very, very much at risk from these fierce winds for the rest of the afternoon.
Thank you for that update, John Catley. And I'll tell you what, even if you were out in that weather, John, it would never blow that moustache off your lip. It's been clinging there resolutely since I was but a snip of a lad. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show, John Catley. Next time, please, you have some colour-coordinated jumpers. So have a red, maybe an amber one underneath your red. You can go through the colours of the rainbow there for us. John Catley, always an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. You stay safe. Thank you, my son. Beautiful. Now, lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, including we're discussing a report into the government anti-extremism scheme Prevent after it utterly failed to stop Southport killer Axel Rudakabana. That's coming next, but first is your headlines with Sophia Hill.
Martin, thank you. And the top stories. Storm Eowyn is sweeping across the UK, bringing record-breaking winds and severe weather conditions. 1 in 5 flights from airports in the UK and Ireland have been cancelled today, and millions of people have been urged to stay home. Forecasters have flagged a rare threat-to-life red weather warning, and over 4 million people across Northern Ireland and Scotland received emergency alerts from the Met Office last night with guidance on how to stay safe. More than 240,000 homes and businesses are without power in Northern Ireland, and a wind speed of 114 miles per hour brought by the storm has been recorded in Ireland, the fastest since records began. 20,000 Scottish Power customers across the centre and south of the country are without electricity, and a red danger to life warning for wind has been extended in Scotland, where more than 35,000 properties have lost power. Local authorities have warned commuters to avoid travel at all cost. And the Southport child killer will likely die behind bars after murdering 3 girls at a dance class. But his 52-year sentence has sparked calls for law changes. Axel Rudakabana received one of the highest minimum custody terms on record for the attack in Southport in July last year, when he was just 17 years old. Alice da Silva Aguirre, BB King and Elsie Dot Stankham were all killed, and harrowing details of the attack were heard at Liverpool Crown Court yesterday. However, Southport Labour MP Patrick Hurley said the sentence was not severe enough, and he asked the Attorney-General to review it as unduly lenient. Due to Rudakabana's age at the time of the attack, he cannot legally receive a whole-life order. The head of the UK's largest police force has welcomed a review of contempt of court laws and said it would be great if more information in cases could be shared at an earlier stage. And Hamas has released the name of the 4 hostages to be released tomorrow under the Gaza ceasefire deal. As predicted, they are all female and soldiers. The terror group says it'll be in exchange for 180 Palestinian prisoners and detainees who are being held by Israel. It's the second exchange since the ceasefire came into effect last Sunday. 3 hostages and 90 prisoners were released in the first swap. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi there, welcome to the latest from the Met Office for GB News. Storm Eowyn continues to move across the UK, bringing dangerous and damaging winds, with the strongest gusts during the rest of Friday moving north into central and northern Scotland. Here's where it's moving as we go through the afternoon. Northern Scotland seeing the strongest winds, having escaped so far, along with a spell of heavy rain and hill snow. Later in the evening, I think gusts of 80, perhaps 90 mile per hour are possible in the far north of Scotland, whilst the very strongest of the winds that we saw across central and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, North Wales, will be easing overnight. So conditions improving, but still a risk of disruption in the north of Scotland. Elsewhere across the UK, it's a cold start to the weekend because of lighter winds and clear skies. Perhaps some spots where we'll see ice and frost And it will be cold across Scotland, particularly feeling cold with the strong wind continuing to blow. Frequent wintry showers over the hills and coasts. Northern Ireland also seeing 1 or 2 rain, sleet and snow showers moving in. But for England and Wales, it's sunny skies for the vast majority as we begin the weekend. Much lighter winds and actually a fine day to come for many parts of England, Wales and then into southern and eastern Scotland. We're going to see mostly fair weather. Northern Ireland, a reasonable morning, but it turns cloudy and there'll be some lively rain and wind gusts moving in by the end of the afternoon. Meanwhile, the winds finally ease in the north of Scotland, but it stays cold and showery. Elsewhere, it's a fine winter's day, a real change compared with what we're experiencing through Friday. Now, Saturday evening does bring this weather front in the west further east, and it's going to be a gusty feature with some heavy rain for a time, perhaps some thunder. It does move through, and then on Sunday, a fine start, again a cold start, before more wind and rain move in from the southwest later.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. In Cumbria, the M6 is partly blocked in both directions by an overturned vehicle. It's between junction 43 for Carlisle and 44 for the A689 and Carlisle North. In Cheshire, the M53 southbound is partly blocked for repairs. They're taking place at junction 9 for Ellesmere Port. In Derbyshire, delays on the M1 northbound, that's partly blocked for repairs between junction 28 at Mansfield and 29 for Chesterfield. In Berkshire, the M4 westbound is blocked after a collision. It's happened just by junction 4B for the M25, and the queues are now back to Heathrow Airport at junction 4, delays of around 45 minutes.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:36 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, a damning new report by Pictall House into Prevent, of course that's the government's anti-terror strategy, has concluded it is systematically failing in its goals. Now, Southport child murderer, the triple killer, Axel Rudikabana, of course, was referred to the scheme on 3 separate occasions, and yet they still failed to pick up this murderous psychopath. So here's the question. Should Prevent be ditched and its failed officers face prosecution? Well, I'm now joined in the studio by the head of domestic policy at Pictall House, and that is Jacob Williams. Jacob, always a pleasure to have your company in the studio. Got to admit, I've been absolutely damning in my thoughts towards Prevent. 3 times they missed the killer. 3 children could be alive if they'd done their job. Obsessed with the far right, too afraid to call out black people when they're threatening to attack white people. That's what happened here. I think Prevent should go in the dustbin of history, and I think the people who missed Rudikabana should be arrested for their failings in that. You, however, have done a more sober report. What are your findings?
Prevent has failed in everything it's supposed to do. It's failed in its basic duty to prevent terrorism. Cases like the one we're discussing, the Southport killer, are just the tip of the iceberg. Prevent is not only failing to focus on the people who are most at risk of violence, it's also harassing innocent civilians of all backgrounds and threatening their freedom of speech with a frankly Orwellian system of thought policing.
Yeah, and so they're basically monitoring what people tweet or say on Facebook, raising flags that they're racist. Even at schools, they're doing this, and then they're turning a blind eye to actual real-world threats. And isn't that one of the key findings of your report? Stop worrying about policing thought and actually go for the genuine real-world bad guys.
Absolutely, and I want to say to the whole country that this affects everyone. It isn't just those accused of racism, it's those accused of being Islamic extremists, it's everyone who's being falsely accused. It's 4-year-old boys being reported for talking about Fortnite, 10-year-olds being reported for writing stories about Palestine. Jacob Rees-Mogg, it's a monumental absurdity. It affects all British citizens, it's threatening our rights, and it's not keeping us safe because there's no evidence that holding objectionable views is directly linked to becoming a terrorist. It's more often insane, damaged individuals, and that's what we need to be focusing on. Prevent needs to be refocused on capturing people who are actually likely to commit crime and not policing our thoughts.
OK, Jacob, it's an excellent report. I've been through it. Can you outline for our viewers some of your recommendations? What's the way forward to save this very tarnished institution?
There are two types of people that Prevent needs to focus on. Number one are people where we have direct evidence that they're actually plotting violence. These are the people who deserve to be harassed by the state. These are the people who ought to be being monitored and surveilled. And number two is people who've already broken the law but not yet committed violence. They've committed non-violent crimes. These people have been convicted by due process of law. They've already forfeited their rights because they are criminals, and it's right that we investigate them more closely. By doing this, we'll not only protect innocent people from getting caught up, we'll actually do a far better job of what Prevent is supposed to do, which is prevent real violence.
Is the problem, though, that within Prevent, it's been captured by a woke mindset? We had a former Prevent officer on the show yesterday, very, very insightful, saying ostensibly they are looking for far right. It polishes their halo to find far right extremism. That's why they're sniffling around in people's tweets and Facebook posts. But when they're seeing actual violence, that doesn't quite fit the pattern, they're turning a blind eye. It could be problematic, it could be racist, could be Islamophobic. So it's not just the framework, it's the personnel. We've got the wrong kinds of mindset. We need to be, actually hammering down on people, not just like we saw with the rape gangs, not being afraid to make comments because the wrong kind of demographic we're going after.
Yeah, I think that it's when you have an institution that is obsessed with ideology, which is what Prevent is, because we found that people are 6 times more likely to actually be referred if their ideology is unclear versus going on to the next stage. So most of these are just false reports. Well, when you have an institution like that, it's just so easy for it to get captured by any ideological or political agenda, and so everyone is falling victim to this.
Are you confident? We've been promised by the Prime Minister a full systemic inquiry into Southport, including looking at Prevent. No stone will remain unturned, we keep hearing. But how? How can it be the case that somebody like Rudy Cabana was simply missed 3 times? Doesn't that say it's not a case of, well, I don't know, tweaking things or fettling things? The entire system seems completely and utterly inept.
I agree with you entirely, and it's far beyond Rudy Cabana. It is 5 killers, actual killers, were referred to Prevent over the last few years. None of them were stopped. It is failing entirely, and it needs to be stripped back to doing the basic role it's supposed to do and get rid of this absurd ideological policing.
I saw the former head of Prevent on a rival news channel. It won't come on GB News. Please come on. Come on here and face music. I'd like to ask you, why do you keep blaming social media? Why do you keep blaming Elon Musk? Why do you keep blaming Amazon for delivering knives? This isn't where we should be looking. That is a symptom. The cause is a mindset, a poison, and the ideology that drives that poison, let's be honest, 80% of their own referrals are Islamic terrorism. That's where the real problem is. And Rudy Cabana may or may not fit into that. They're saying he might have had some far left tendencies because he said, going after white racists. He made out he was called racist at school. That's why he took a knife into school. You can't blame it on racism when you start taking knives. 10 times he carried a knife. 3 times he was caught by Prevent. He never got picked up. Is that an organisation which you think should carry on? Can it be saved?
Prevent, in its current form, it's hated by just about everyone. There are those who think that it's targeting the far right too much. There are those who think quite the opposite of what you said. It's about an equal number of far right versus Islamist referrals who are going through Prevent. So this is an institution that's just targeting any community that can be subjectively painted as extreme, and it's very, very dangerous what they're doing, and it's not keeping us safe. It does need to be reformed root and branch.
OK, superb. It's a great report. Thank you very much. It's called The Prevent Programme is Systematically Failing in Its Goals. And, of course, that is by the Pictorial House. And that is Jacob Williams, the Head of Domestic Policy. Thanks for coming into the studio today.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure. Now, in a huge embarrassment for the government, another supermarket giant has backed our British farmers. That's next with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News, Business News Channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Estelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
This was thought to be a Ruskin. Ruskin was a very considerable polymath, an artist as well as many other things. So do you know why it was submitted for reappraisal? Was there a bit of a suspicion that it had been misidentified?
No, as you say, it's a service that Christie's offer. You can submit an artwork that you have, so anyone can submit it and request an estimate, and then the auction house's appraisal service allows you space as well to describe it and ask for evaluation. And Christie's sort of looked at it behind the sheet of dirty old glass and recognised a sort of Turner-esque mood and feel and ambience about it. And because there was this close relationship between Ruskin and Turner, which is fascinating, we'll come on to that shortly, but they sort of felt, well, the brushstrokes are very strong, the line is very economic, and the colour of the palette seems to be rather Turner-esque. And then they called in a specialist paper historian who confirmed that actually the paper that was used was one that Turner favoured himself. So yes, it was originally considered to be by Ruskin, but then we discovered something more magnificent. And don't forget, what's really interesting, now it's for sale. The lucky buyer is not just buying a picture. The lucky buyer is buying a life story, a relationship that actually changed the course of art history because of the relationship between Ruskin and Turner themselves.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:47 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News on this Friday afternoon. Now, farming, because Waitrose are the latest supermarkets to demand the government to reconsider the inheritance tax grab on British farmers in another massive embarrassment for under-fire Chancellor Rachel Reeves. And they now join Co-op, Asda, Morrison's, Lidl and Aldi, and I believe Tesco, who are now backing the great British farmers. Let's speak to one of them now, and that man is Andrew Ward. Andrew, welcome to the studio, to the show. Hope you're keeping safe in all this weather for starters. Hope your farmers have been blown away. You haven't lost a load of crops. I digress. Let's get back onto this.
Thank you. Hello, Martin.
So let's get back onto this. So Morrison's were the first to come out, of course, after that last wave of protests where there was that the tractors were circling around one of their depots. The head of rural affairs at Morrison's came out and supported you guys. I know, having been speaking with yourself and Martin Williams, Ollie Harrison, Clive Bailey, you were very, very keen to see other supermarkets follow suit, and that appears to be the direction of travel. Tell us more.
Yes, it does, Martin, and it's something we've been working on for a number of weeks now, and we're doing a lot behind the scenes that isn't aware or isn't shown out on social media and out in the public, and this is just one of the things we're doing. And we're part of the group. We're a small group that we're trying to do things nicely, if you like. We're trying to do things peacefully, because we don't believe that being militant, blocking food distribution centres at the minute, and generally causing havoc and stopping the public going about their daily lives, we don't believe that's the way to go. And I think it's proving that we're actually now being invited to more meetings. We're being asked for more input into influential things. And I think we're getting our feet under more important tables by doing it this way rather than causing disruption. And the supermarkets are massive. To get those on side, like you've just said, and particularly Tesco as well, it's just really big, and it's just another step in what we hope is the direction into getting dialogue and actually getting to meet with the Chancellor and with Keir Starmer and actually meet face to face so we can actually put our points across, because that's really what we want to do, and that's our next step.
You know, Andrew, I know from speaking to yourself and your colleagues many times, you fellas want to sit down, don't you? You want to have an adult, reasonable conversation. You want to negotiate on the terms of this inheritance tax grab. I think a lot of you agree that those, you might call them what, plastic farmers who are buying land to specifically dodge inheritance tax, then they should perhaps face a tariff. But your problem isn't that. It's the smaller holdings, as we've said so many times before, so often £1 million can be breached just in the tractors and the equipment, the equipment that you own, let alone a scrap of land. Now the supermarkets are behind you. Do you think that's more likely, or are the government just going to, pardon the pun, they're just going to dig in and plough the same furrow against you?
Well, they are looking like that at the minute, and they are absolutely refusing to have any dialogue with us whatsoever. And every time they're challenged, whether they're challenged in Parliament, whether they're challenged with anybody of any influence, they keep trotting out the same old thing, that they inherited this awful financial situation and farmers have to pay the way, and that the £1 million threshold is £3 million for a lot of people, when for people like myself who aren't married, it's £1.5 million with all the other bits added on. And they keep putting out the same information without anything new. And it's in that situation that we really want to just alert them to what's going on and show them the errors of the way and put some proper figures in front of them from farmers, not economists, not these people that aren't involved in farming, that they call them the government advisors, but people who are actually on the ground in a farmyard who've got generations of families that's going to be massively affected by this. And this is what we want to do. And of course, the other thing, Martin, that's really hitting us hard is all the other impacts and all the other things in the budget that they put forward. So it's not just the inheritance tax, it's every other measure that's just making it difficult to us to put food on the plate and us to remain profitable.
Yeah, Andrew, I'm surprised you're not married. You're a handsome fella. You own a farm. Anyway, I digress. On a more serious point, there's been this talk all the time about playing Queensberry rules, about negotiating as you are now, parking tractors in car parks at supermarkets rather than blockading supermarkets, a show of presence rather than a show of force. But if that doesn't work, and I know you keep saying we don't want to be militant, we don't want to cause trouble, but if they don't listen to the softly approach, do you think there might be the danger that some more radical farmers might get, how should we put it, a little bit more French about things?
Well, you're right, Martin. There is the French, if you like, the French atmosphere to some people and some farmers. And there is a group of farmers that are not happy and they don't think we're going about things the right way. But that's fine. If they want to carry on and do that side of things, that's fine. Let them get on with that. But at the minute, we feel we're having more influence by doing things the British way, if you like, rather than the French way. And I think it's really been backed up at the moment. You mentioned last Friday and there's tractors into supermarkets. I visited, I was part of a group of tractors. We went round to town and we had some fantastic, unbelievable feedback. We went into Waitrose. The store manager welcomed us in there, asked us in for breakfast and the coffee and to talk to the shoppers. We had people coming outside talking to us and everybody going in and out. We didn't have any negative comments from anybody. And the most unusual sort of people that you'd think were against us, and every supermarket went into Aldi, we went into Lidl and all those supermarkets that you'd say that they don't have the prices or the standard of the food that Waitrose have in. Every single person was on our side and said, you keep going, we're with you. We need farmers to produce food and also look after the countryside. So last Friday, Martin, was absolutely hugely successful. It really, really was. And so, I think that backs up by doing things peacefully is right. But obviously we need to have dialogue with the government. Until we get that, you can't say what we're doing it is a success.
OK, beautiful stuff. Great. Keep the pressure up. And next time we're down in London, let's go for a pint again. Thank you very much, Andrew Ward. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Martin.
To see you on the show. You take care, my friend. OK, now then, moving on. The Labour-ran Wigan Council has dramatically defied Sir Keir Starmer and voted for a full national inquiry into rape gangs. I'll be joined by the heroic independent councillor soon. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. There's your weather.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome to the latest from the Met Office for GB News. Storm Eowyn continues to move across the UK, bringing dangerous and damaging winds, with the strongest gusts during the rest of Friday moving north into central and northern Scotland. Here's where it's moving as we go through the afternoon. Northern Scotland seeing the strongest winds, having escaped so far, along with a spell of heavy rain and hill snow. Later in the evening, I think gusts of 80, perhaps 90 mile per hour are possible in the far north of Scotland, whilst the very strongest of the winds that we saw across central and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, North Wales, will be easing overnight. So conditions improving, but still a risk of disruption in the north of Scotland. Elsewhere across the UK, it's a cold start to the weekend because of lighter winds and clear skies. Perhaps some spots where we'll see ice and frost. And it will be cold across Scotland, particularly feeling cold with the strong wind continuing to blow. Frequent wintry showers over the hills and coasts. Northern Ireland also seeing one or two rain, sleet and snow showers moving in. But for England and Wales, it's sunny skies for the vast majority as we begin the weekend. Much lighter winds and actually a fine day to come for many parts of England, Wales and then into southern and eastern Scotland. We're going to see mostly fair weather. Northern Ireland, a reasonable morning, but it turns cloudy and there'll be some lively rain and wind gusts moving in by the end of the afternoon. Meanwhile, the winds finally ease in the north of Scotland, but it stays cold and showery. Elsewhere, it's a fine winter's day, a real change compared with what we're experiencing through Friday. Now, Saturday evening does bring this weather front in the west further east, and it's going to be a gusty feature with some heavy rain for a time, perhaps some thunder. It does move through, and then on Sunday, a fine start, again a cold start, before more wind and rain move in from the southwest later.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. Well, the weather's still causing problems on the roads this afternoon, particularly in Cumbria. The M6 still partly blocked in both directions by an overturned vehicle between Carlisle at junction 43 and junction 44 for the A689. There's now a overturned lorry on the northbound M6 through there between Carlisle and the A689, so do expect long delays there. In County Durham, the A1M southbound is partly blocked by an overturned vehicle. That's near junction 58 for Burtree. In Derbyshire, long delays on the M1 northbound. 2 lanes are shut there for emergency repairs. They're taking place between junction 28 for Mansfield and junction 29 for Chesterfield, so do expect some long queues.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
There's just 2 weeks left to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far. £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
Oh my God.
That's a big surprise.
Amazing. Just the best feeling ever.
I'm in shock. That is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christie's tonight, and here
We do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
A very, very good afternoon to you and a happy Friday. It's 4 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and, of course, all across the UK. On today's show, in a massive victory for sexual abuse survivors, Labour-ran Wigan Council has dramatically defied Keir Starmer and voted for a full national inquiry into rape gangs. I'll be joined by the heroic independent councillor who refused to be silenced. Might this be a nationwide tipping point? And a single mum from Cornwall who was so moved by the plight of rape gang survivors, well, she decided to organise a Million Women March, which is taking place in a few weeks' time. Now, ahead of those marches that take place across British towns on February the 17th, I'll be joined by her co-organiser, Yvette, who says we will never stop until survivors get justice. And today, Waitrose became the latest British supermarkets to throw their weight behind our farmers in what will surely be yet another huge embarrassment for under fire Chancellor Rachel Reeves. On today's show, I'll be joined by British farmers who say they've picked on the wrong target. And a Croydon man who stopped a stabbing rampage, a campaigner who GB News helped to raise £100,000 in just 4 hours for the survivors of Southport in the murderous rampage there today. Now celebrate the very, very best of great British heroes, because in these dark times, don't we all need a wonderful, good news story? That's all coming in your next hour. Now, I think yesterday a lot of us had very, very difficult days. That astonishing, heartbreaking evidence coming out of the murder trial in Liverpool Crown Court, because yesterday on my show I had on Mark Foreman. He's a charity leader who's been raising money for the survivors of that Southport attack. Well, when he came on the show yesterday, his fundraiser was at the £69,000 mark. That was how it started before Mark came on the show. And I appeal to you, the magnificent GB News viewers, to get involved. Throw in whatever you could afford, because every penny of this fundraiser is going directly to the families of those impacted in that murderous rampage on 29th of July last year. It's called Helping the Southport Families after 29th of July 2024 attack. And now look, this is how much we raised. It's at £175,000. That's right. GB News helped this fundraiser to raise over £100,000 in just 4 hours. That's 25 grand an hour that you lot put into this kitty. I am astonishingly proud of you all for doing your bit. Every penny will go towards helping, as he said, the families to build new memories. Mark Foreman wants them to build new memories to help them move on, to heal, and to have a chance of a positive life. He was in tears when he was on the show. He messaged Eleanor, my producer, afterwards, was so effusively thankful and was passing on the thanks to GB News viewers for helping him, for helping the families. And I want to say to all you wonderful people watching now, anybody who donated, you very, very are the best British people out there, and I'm getting emotional about this. You just don't know how important it is. You've just given 100 grand to those families. You're magnificent. Mark Foreman, you're magnificent. Thanks to all of you. Now, get in touch the usual way, gbnews.com/You'll Say. But now's your headlines, and here's Sophia Hill.
Martin, thank you. It's just gone 4 o'clock. Here are your top stories from the GB newsroom. Storm Eowyn is sweeping across the UK, bringing record-breaking winds and severe weather conditions. 1 in 5 flights from airports in the UK and Ireland have been cancelled today, and millions of people have been urged to stay home. Forecasters have flagged a rare threat-to-life red weather warning, and over 4 million people across Northern Ireland and Scotland received emergency alerts from the Met Office last night with guidance on how to stay safe. More than 240,000 homes and businesses are without power in Northern Ireland, and a wind speed of 114 miles per hour brought by the storm has been recorded in Ireland, the fastest since records began. 20,000 Scottish Power customers across the centre and south of the country are without electricity, and a red danger to life warning for wind has been extended in Scotland, where more than 35,000 properties have lost power. Local authorities have warned commuters to avoid travel at all costs. And the Southport child killer will likely die behind bars after murdering 3 girls at a dance class, but his 52-year sentence has sparked calls for law changes. Axel Rudikabana received one of the highest minimum custody terms on record for the attack in Southport in July last year, where he was 17 years old. Alistair Silva Aguirre, BB King and Elsie Stankham were all killed, and harrowing details of the attack were heard at Liverpool Crown Court yesterday. However, Southport's Labour MP Patrick Hurley said the sentence was not severe enough, and he asked the Attorney-General to review it as unduly lenient. Due to Rudikabana's age at the time of the attack, he cannot legally receive a whole life order. The head of the UK's largest police force has welcomed a review of contempt of court laws and said it would be great if more information in cases could be shared at an earlier stage. Defence Secretary John Healey told GB News Axel Rudikabana did not get a whole life sentence because international laws has prevented it.
The technicality of the whole life sentences, I think it's important to know that the last government did reduce it to 18 in line with international law after the Manchester Arena bombings, and that still stands. There are a range of other aspects of law, of agencies who have failed in this case to step in. They knew about this man's extreme violence, but they failed to take any steps that might have prevented it. And there may be changes also in the programmes that are designed to deal with this sort of extremism. That's what the inquiry now, the court case has finished, which was launched this week, will do.
And Hamas has announced the names of the 4 Israeli women soldiers to be released in the second swap under the ceasefire deal in Gaza. Karina Ariev, Daniela Gilboa, Naama Levy and Liri Albag are all to be released tomorrow. The terror group says it'll be in exchange for 180 Palestinian prisoners and detainees who are being held by Israel. It's the second exchange since the ceasefire came into effect last Sunday. 3 hostages and 90 prisoners were released in the first swap. Meanwhile, a deal worth around £9 billion has been struck with Rolls-Royce by the government to help Britain's nuclear submarines. The 8-year contract, dubbed Unity, is aimed at safeguarding 4,000 jobs and creating over 1,000 more, as well as bolstering national security and the UK economy. Defence Secretary John Healey said the agreement showed defence can be used as an engine for growth and a commitment to Britain's nuclear deterrent. The ministry estimates it'll save more than £400 million over the full 8-year period by making delivery more efficient and offering incentives to produce more for no increase in cost. And a mother whose 4 young boys died in a fire after she left them home alone to go to the supermarket has been jailed for 10 years. Devika Rose left her 2 sets of twins in the locked terrace house when the fatal blaze broke out on the evening of the 16th of December 2021. Jurors were told the 4 children died after a discarded cigarette or upturned tea light sparked a blaze at the family house in South London. The 30-year-old, who suffered from mental health problems, was found guilty of 4 counts of manslaughter following trial. Emma Curry of the Crown Prosecution Service has said this was an entirely preventable tragedy, resulting in the devastating loss of 4 young boys who had their whole lives ahead of them. And 2 giant pandas have made their public debut at the Smithsonian National Zoo in Washington, D.C. A zoo volunteer says Bao Li, a male whose name translates to active and vital power, and King Bao, a female whose name means green and treasure, have already won the hearts of our staff and volunteers. The pandas, both 3 years old, make their much welcome return after a 15-month absence. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More in half an hour.
Hello.
Thank you, Sophia. Now, we've got some breaking news. That's Chris Hope saying hello. We've got some breaking news because for the first time, a new poll has dramatically put Reform UK ahead of both the Labour Party and the Conservatives. Well, the poll by Find Out Now asked the question, if a general election was called tomorrow, how would you vote? And the astonishing information is this. 26% said Reform, 23% said Tories, and a mere 22% said the Labour Party. And let's bring in now GB News political editor Chris Hope, who joins me in the studio. Chris, hello. So, this is significant because for the first time, the Reform Party are now in front. It's only one poll, but nevertheless, no doubt Mr Farage and his allies will be saying this is a bit of a moment.
Well,
Tell us more.
Right now from Nigel Farage in last moments. Reform leads for the first time in a national opinion poll. This is just the beginning, he says. Zia Yousaf, the party chairman, says this: no pacts, no deals. Reform is headed for government. But before we talk about the pact issue, let's look briefly at what these numbers are. Reform at 1 point to 26%, according to Find Out Now. Tories down 2 at 23%. Labour down 2 on screen now at 22%. Lib Dems unchanged at 12%. Reform now, according to Find Out Now, have a 4-point lead over the ruling government party Labour, a 3-point lead over the Tories. This is a moment in politics. It's happened right now. We're getting reaction probably later on from the Tory party, but this is alarming for the two main parties. Yet again, though, just 5 MPs in Parliament. You know, it's one poll. Look at the SDP, Martin, back in 1982. Yep. They're on at 40 points in the polls, 15 points ahead of the Tory government, and that did not convert into seats at the following election in 83. There's a lot of road to travel between now and the election, but this is quite a big moment.
And when you look at the polling, it was polled on Wednesday, so it's very recent. And the sample size, 2,380, a significant sample size. That's up there with like a YouGov poll, right? And the methodology. So people say, oh, it's who are Find Out Now? Who are Find Out Now? Are they a credible polling source?
Well, we've used them before. I mean, they're one of half a dozen to a dozen or so pollsters. Again, we'll wait to see the trend. This is one poll, not all the polls, but this trend is borne out by future polling by other pollsters, YouGov and the like. This is a big worry, I think, for the two main parties. Now, for my podcast today, I spoke to Lord Frost, David Frost. He's a senior Tory and a deep thinker about Tory politics.
Mr Brexit, of course.
Mr Brexit put together the Boris Johnson Brexit deal. He talked about whether the right should merge. And he said if Reform or the Tories are not ahead of each other at the election, there should be an arrangement between those two parties. But this looks like it may be Reform UK is getting the advantage on them.
And when you and I had this conversation in the past hour, I said, is this because Lord Frost is being sent out into the battlefield to negotiate, not this time with Michel Barnier, but with Nigel Farage?
He would say no, and he would say not his own personal opinion. But let's quickly listen to the podcast response there from Lord Frost.
Is a merger inevitable between the Reform and the Conservative Party pre-election?
I think, no, I don't think it is inevitable. I think it's possible that one or other party could come out on top and get a decisive lead, and then politics has to accommodate to that. If it doesn't happen, then there's got to be some sort of arrangement or whatever, because we can't allow Labour to win again on a third of the vote. And I personally don't think it's right to rubbish, for Conservatives to rubbish Reform figures, or even more so people who voted for Reform. And I don't think it's particularly wise for Reform to do that either. We need to be building agreement and understanding between each other, not, digging the trench even deeper. And there's some signs that's happening, and I don't particularly feel comfortable with it, I must say. Maybe that will be achieved by one party winning out over the other, or maybe it will be through some sort of deal, and it's too soon to be sure yet, I think.
So, Chris, just to repeat, as I said in the past hour, this feels to me like the Conservatives might be perhaps needing reform more than the other way around. And just looking at the previous polls that Find Out Now have done, the trend since November is that the Conservatives have gone back 4 points, the Labour Party have gone back 3 points, and Reform UK have gone forward 4 points. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's over 6 polls. The trend, the momentum, is what we're seeing on our screen now.
That's
for the first time, putting Reform in pole position.
Just to remind viewers of the significance of this moment, again, only a single poll, Martin. There is a trend with this poll, but other polls have their own data sets. Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK, says this: Reform leads for the first time in a national opinion poll. This is just the beginning, he says, full stop. Zia Youssef, the party's main backer, the main financial backer at the moment, he says this first poll to show Reform with a decisive lead, 3 points out of the Tories, 4 on Labour. No pacts, no deals, he says. Reform is headed for government. There's a long way to go before the election, but mark this moment in the political cycle.
And I guess, can it keep on going? And will there be that deal? Can be made or not? It's interesting with Lord Frost there. Lord Frost says there should be some kind of cozying up. Kemi Baydock, when you asked her last week, said absolutely no chance.
We might try and get that clip for the next hour. I did ask you directly last Thursday afternoon, would you just merge with Reform to bring the right together? She said that Nigel Farage wants to destroy the Tory party. I can't merge with him. But I just wonder, at some point, as Lord Frost says there, if Reform are way in ahead, will the Tories fall in behind? Will Kemi Baydock not do that? I don't think so. Will a different leader, a different challenge to do that? To come to an agreement, because the Labour Party is the big enemy against what Reform and the Tories are trying to do.
And in this polling, the Labour Party is going as a free-fall. Breaking news this hour: Reform UK leading a national poll for the first time. It's the last time that a Farage outfit led the polls was at the Brexit Party in 2019, when I was elected as an MP.
That's when they won the European elections, then.
Correct. That was a proportional representation, very different time. Chris, get some more political reaction for us. I know you can for the next hour. That's the breaking story. And let's move on now to another huge story today in politics, and it's this: embarrassment for Keir Starmer as a cabinet member's constituency has voted for a national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal. The Labour-led Wigan Council broke with the government's position following Stockton Council earlier this week. Later in the show, I'll be joined by the hero councillor, Morin O'Burn, who put forward this motion. But I'm now joined by GBNews' reporter Charlie Peters. Charlie, this to me feels like there's a movement going on. There's momentum. There's forward direction. Bradford earlier this week said no. Wigan has said yes. And it's a huge embarrassment for Keir Starmer, and it's a big embarrassment for the local MP, Lisa Nandy. Tell us more.
Well, Martin, Bradford said no to a local investigation. A motion was put forward there calling for a local inquiry. We should stress that's the government's position. The Labour government supports local inquiries being voted on by their areas. Now, critics of that stance have told me over many years, but especially over the last month, that the problem with that position, Martin, is that the local areas often don't want those investigations because it would and could reveal very embarrassing and very awful information about how the local authority has been potentially involved in that sort of child abuse. Now, on Monday at the Home Affairs Select Committee, Alexis Jay, who wrote the ICSA inquiry, the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, and also wrote the local report into Rotherham, she confirms that often the only way to get a local inquiry launched was for bad publicity. In effect, she said, it takes the power of the media taking the effort to talk about these issues, going to those local areas, exposing survivors who've not been picked up by the police or the local authority, exposing failures in dealing with those cases, and also potentially revealing ongoing or past criminality. That's what it takes to get a local inquiry forced, because the weight of bad publicity just becomes too much. But in Bradford, there's not been much of an investigation there. Perhaps watch this space for future work from GB News. But last night, we heard that in Stockton Council, they'd voted for a national inquiry. And today, this morning, Wigan Council did the same. Separate to those sort of votes rejected in Bradford, but calling for a national statutory investigation into this crisis. As you were saying, Martin, Morin O'Burn, the independent councillor, bringing forward that motion. She attempted to do so on Wednesday night. She was not able to do so, the council say, because time ran out. This morning, they weren't able to have a debate on the motion that she brought forward, but it was voted on unanimously. Another Labour-run council supporting an investigation going against the national government's position.
It really is a huge breakthrough for survivors, Charlie, and I keep thanking you for your work, but no, thanks again. And Morin O'Burn will be joined by Maureen in the next hour. They stopped her talking. Here's her statement. She'll be reading it out on GB News, and she'll be sharing her fantastic positive news that Wigan has seen the light. Charlie Peters, magnificent. See you again in the next hour. I've got a comment here from the leader, of Wigan Council, and that's the councillor David Molyneux. He told GB News this: the motion was carried unanimously, and I am pleased to support our colleagues at Oldham Council. Of course, Oldham voted for a localised report. Our intention was always to support this motion from the outset. I also welcome that the council's leader of the opposition has written to the mayor to apologise for his colleague's outburst that led to the adjournment that concluded the meeting. All power to Morin O'Burn, and we'll be joining by her in the next hour. But now on the same topic, I'm delighted to say I'm joined by the organiser of the Million Women March protesting over the rape gang scandal, and that's Yvette Cleland. Yvette, welcome to the show. Absolute pleasure to have you on. So your colleague Nat, mutual friend of ours, was on my show a few weeks ago, so moved by the plight of grooming gang, rape gang survivors and other sexual abuse that she decided to start this Million Women March. As we near the date, tell us, how is it going? Where are the marchers and how can people get involved to support you?
So the marches are happening now all around the country. When Nat originally came to us and asked her to support her, it was really looking at just a London-based march, meeting on the 17th of February at Boudica Statue. Since then, so many other women all around the country have said, we can't all get to London, it's expensive, it's a long journey, we've got kids. So they have started their own marches, and we now have marches going from Glasgow, from Liverpool, Manchester, Norwich, down as far as Truro, Liverpool. So it's stretching across the country. But if I could signpost women to look at joining us, if you go on to Twitter, we have at MWM _London, and there are details. There's a pinned tweet there that tells as many women as possible where you can come to meet and join us. And it's so important that we get out there in our thousands and our millions.
And also you have a Facebook page, I believe, so people can just simply search for Million Women March. Yvette, I'm always moved by the personal comments. I know that you've been getting the kind of things people have been saying. It's so important to get the humanity across, what's motivating people to get involved in your march and your move. What kind of things have people been saying to you about why they feel it's time to stand up and be counted around survivors of sexual abuse and rape gangs?
Because we need desperately to have institutional change in this country. We're no longer a country when we cannot look after our most vulnerable, and our most vulnerable are our children, and our children are being abused on a mass scale. And we need to shine some sunlight, that's the best disinfectant, onto the institutions in this country that are failing our children. We've seen with Southport this week, none of those little girls needed to die. And it is just heartbreaking. Sarah Sharif did not need to die. Institutions have let all of these children down, and still the victims of grooming gangs that are operating in over 70 cities and towns and villages across this country, they have to have justice, and we will only get that justice when we go and actually take on those institutions that are failing us. They need to put children at the centre of what they're doing.
Yvette Cleland, you know, I said it before, not all heroes wear capes. You know, people like you, heroes, getting out there, getting things going, getting a movement going, yourself and Nat. Everybody, please get involved in the Million Women March. Get involved online, turn up, show your support. Yvette, thank you very, very much for coming on the show today, and I wish you the best of luck, and make sure you come back, all Nat, on the show for a further updates before that march. You take care, have a brilliant weekend. Now, Chris Hope's waving away, but you've got some more breaking news on this reform poll, quickly.
Yeah, I've got a spokesman for Kemi Badenoch tells GB News moments ago, polls go up and down and change every week, Martin. We're focused on what matters, the damage Labour is doing to the economy, our schools and our international standing. Tories reacting quickly because this is a damaging poll.
It is, and they're being forced to react. That's the point. They're not marching. They're marching to somebody else's drums. Thank you very much, Chris Hope. Now we've got to move on because red weather warnings are enforced as storms batter Britain. And we're crossing live now to our drenched GB News reporter, Tony Maguire, who I'm determined to get swept into the sea before the end of the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Business News Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast every day from 6 a.m.
Underestimate what you did, because to do it in their backyard as well, I bet they weren't happy about it, were they, Brad?
No, definitely not. Well, it makes it all the more sweeter. So they're usually pretty dominant in a 2-man event, but 4-man's usually where we can challenge them. And yeah, we managed to do it yesterday and put down 2 solid runs. And yeah.
So yeah, funding was a big issue for us in the last quad, but because of our results recently, we've picked up a lot more funding from UK Sport. So we're well funded now, and but yeah, the Bob is in the back of the van behind us, so we're driving it down to St Moritz as we speak. So yeah, that's how it all works in the background in bobsleigh.
Brad, you're the pilot, correct? So you're up front.
Yeah.
Now, what happens? I always wonder, because I remember seeing John Noakes on. Do you remember John Noakes on Blue Peter when he fell out of the Bob and he ended up showing the back of his backside on TV because he had a big scar on there? What? So you've got the brake man. You're at the front. So where are you then, Aaron? Are you what number are you?
So I'm number 3. Yeah.
Right. So what do you do there? Is it just a matter of it's the running power is what it's all about to get off to a good start, and then you can sit and enjoy the ride?
Yeah, that's it. So for number 2 and myself, number 3, it's all about getting that Bob off the line and then just zipping it up to as high a speed as we can, basically. Getting in, staying low, having good aerodynamics and staying still and let Brad do the work.
Yeah, it's definitely not a comfortable position for them because we're bending them and twisting them into quite an uncomfortable position to get as aerodynamic as possible. And when you've got 6 times G's pushing you through that is not... Yeah, not
definitely
fun.
Stiff back this morning, that's for sure.
Because I'm just thinking where me and Eamon would sit. Is it 2 and 3, or would he go at number 4? What do you fancy?
I would be too frightened to do that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Welcome back to 4:27 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, people in the UK are being urged to stay indoors and avoid travelling at all costs as a storm that nobody can pronounce rolls into town. Now, joining us now is our Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire. Tony, the last time we crossed you were hanging on by your fingernails. Is the wind passing? Is the gale force still with you?
Well, very much, Martin. These winds here, listening to Doogie earlier on, it sounded a lot like after a few hours that things would settle down. But nevertheless, here we are now around hour 6 of the 7-hour red weather warning, and as you can see and hear behind me, the white horses dancing in over the Ayrshire coast just now, showing no sign of letting up whatsoever. This has been a huge this has been a huge issue for all of Scotland, however, especially the southern half, where that red weather warning was actually extended this afternoon to cover more areas of Dumfries and Galloway, as wind speeds of up to 100 miles an hour. Those gale bursts have been tackling the centre of Scotland now, and as you can see behind me, a really beautiful sunset, and that will be the last light for the Ayrshire coast, especially for all these houses on the front. The power has gone from all of them, and a little bit inland, the same is true of the other residents of Troon. Now, they actually ended up going out to a shop. We found one shop in the whole area that was open, and we spoke to some of the shoppers and the owner about why on earth was he open during this weather.
Because we decided to open stay because community needs somewhere to get their shopping, somebody to do it.
Need somebody to do it?
Do it, yeah. Therefore, I'm stay open, like the weather. Yeah.
Are you afraid of the weather?
Yeah, afraid, yeah. Well, I'm still inside, you know.
That's it, you're safe inside, and
yeah.
You haven't lost power?
Yeah, a couple of times. 3 times, I think so.
If you're listening carefully there, you might have heard a little noise of it was another alert came through my phone when I was in that shop. Certainly it doesn't feel here on the coast like Storm Éowyn is going to settle down anytime soon. Oh, I'm going to stay in my seat here.
I thought you'd gone flying off the cliff there. I thought that beeping noise was you buying 20 ciggies. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us there, Tony Maguire. Maybe in the next hour you get blown off the cliff. Well, now you go, my old son, and get tied to that guy rope. Now, let's move on and speak with the travel journalist, Christian Wolmer. Christian, welcome to the show. So it only takes a few leaves or a bit of ice for Britain to ground to a halt. I'm assuming things are no different with a storm like this. What's the travel latest?
I think that's a little bit unfair. This is well beyond expectations. It is indeed the worst storm for some 25 years. And the authorities have reacted well to this because we haven't heard of any fatalities. And I think people have really taken on board the fact that this is serious. And in Scotland, they've implemented this thing. My stepdaughter's up there, and she got this enormous beeping noise out of her phone, which told her to stay indoors and gave her warnings about the red alert and stuff. So there is new technology is being used, I think, to ensure that people don't go outside. The whole of ScotRail is not working. The buses are not working. No buses or trains in Northern Ireland. So I think this has actually been handled pretty well by the authorities, the transport companies.
And in fact, Christian Wolmer, we just had Tony Maguire, our Scotland reporter there.
I saw
at a shop, the only shop open in the area, and that beep went off on his phone. That beep, of course, was a warning to stay inside. And of course, we sent him straight back outside to do some more reporting, because that's what we do. The weather won't stop GB News, and nor will the risk of a reporter getting blown off a cliff. I digress. On a serious point, we're seeing a lot of fallen trees there. What's that doing to Britain's railway networks? We've seen some large vehicles blown over on motorways.
Yes, and falling trees really are the reason why it's very important to stop trains in this instance. I mean, there have been a couple of accidents lately on the railways where it has been caused by landslides or trees coming down, and that's a really great danger for the railways. And, you know, this is going to get worse. I know this is a station that doesn't really believe in climate change, but the weather has gone, the temperature's gone up by 1.5 degrees on average since the 1800s. So it is very likely that this is being caused by climate change. And the very extreme nature of a lot of these events, the heavy rainfall we've had in the UK, all year or for the whole year does suggest that we're in for far worse in the near future.
OK, I hate to rain on your parade, Christian Walmer, but we've simply run out of time. Thanks for joining us on GB News. Thank you. Loads more still to come between now and 5 o'clock, including a massive embarrassment for the government because yet another supermarket giant has backed British farmers and gone against the will of Chancellor Rachel Reeves. But first, here's your headlines with Sophia Hill.
Thank you, Martin. The top story, as you've just been hearing, Storm Eowyn is sweeping across the UK, bringing record-breaking winds and severe weather conditions. 1 in 5 flights from airports in the UK and Ireland have been cancelled today, and millions of people have been urged to stay home. Forecasters have flagged a rare threat to life, red weather warning. Over 4 million people across Northern Ireland and Scotland received emergency alerts from the Met Office last night, with guidance on how to stay safe. More than 240,000 homes and businesses are without power in Northern Ireland, and a wind speed of 114 miles per hour brought by the storm has been recorded in Ireland, the fastest since records began. 20,000 Scottish Power customers across the centre and south of the country are without electricity, and a red danger to life warning for wind has been extended in Scotland, where more than 35,000 properties have lost power. Local authorities have warned all commuters to avoid travel at all costs. And the Southport child killer will likely die behind bars after murdering 3 girls at a dance class, but his 52-year sentence has sparked calls for law changes. Axel Rudikabana received one of the highest minimum custody terms on record for the attack in Southport in July last year when he was 17 years old. Alice De Silva Aguirre, BB King and Elsie Stankham were all killed, and harrowing details of the attack were heard at Liverpool Crown Court yesterday. However, Southport Labour MP Patrick Hurley said the sentence was not severe enough, and he asked the Attorney-General to review it as unduly lenient. Due to Rudikabana's age at the time of the attack, he cannot legally receive a whole-life order. The head of the UK's largest police force has welcomed a review of contempt of court laws and said it would be great if more information in cases could be shared at an earlier stage. And Hamas have announced the names of 4 Israeli women soldiers to be released in the second swap under the ceasefire deal in Gaza. Karina Ariev, Daniela Gilboa, Naama Levy and Liri Albag are all to be released tomorrow. The terror group says it'll be in exchange for 180 Palestinian prisoners and detainees who are being held by Israel. It's the second exchange since the ceasefire came into effect last Sunday. 3 hostages and 90 prisoners were released in the first swap. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi there, welcome to the latest from the Met Office for GB News. Storm Eowyn continues to move across the UK, bringing dangerous and damaging winds, with the strongest gusts during the rest of Friday moving north into central and northern Scotland. Here's where it's moving as we go through the afternoon. Northern Scotland seeing the strongest winds, having escaped so far, along with a spell of heavy rain and hill snow. Later in the evening, I think gusts of 80, perhaps 90 mile per hour are possible in the far north of Scotland, whilst the very strongest of the winds that we saw across central and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, North Wales, will be easing overnight. So conditions improving, but still a risk of disruption in the north of Scotland. Elsewhere across the UK, it's a cold start to the weekend because of lighter winds and clear skies. Perhaps some spots where we'll see ice and frost. And it will be cold across Scotland, particularly feeling cold with the strong wind continuing to blow. Frequent wintry showers over the hills and coasts. Northern Ireland also seeing 1 or 2 rain, sleet and snow showers moving in. But for England and Wales, it's sunny skies for the vast majority as we begin the weekend. Much lighter winds and actually a fine day to come for many parts of England, Wales and then into southern and eastern Scotland. We're going to see mostly fair weather. Northern Ireland, a reasonable morning, but it turns cloudy and there'll be some lively rain and wind gusts moving in by the end of the afternoon. Meanwhile, the winds finally ease in the north of Scotland, but it stays cold and showery. Elsewhere, it's a fine winter's day, a real change compared with what we're experiencing through Friday. Now, Saturday evening does bring this weather front in the west further east, and it's going to be a gusty feature with some heavy rain for a time, perhaps some thunder. It does move through, and then on Sunday, a fine start, again a cold start, before more wind and rain move in from the southwest later.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. In Cumbria, severe delays on the M6 as an overturned vehicle blocking 2 lanes in both directions near junction 43 for Carlisle and the A69. There's also an overturned lorry on the northbound carriageway there near junction 43, so do expect some long queues. In Merseyside, the M57 northbound is partly blocked after a collision between junction 1 for the M62 and junction 2 for Prescott. In Derbyshire, long delays on the M1 northbound, 2 lanes shut there for repairs between Mansfield at junction 28 and 29 for Chesterfield. And in Leicestershire, the M42 southbound is partly blocked by a broken down vehicle. It's just after junction 11 for Burton upon Trent and the A42.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:39 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, Waitrose are the latest supermarkets to demand that the government reconsiders its inheritance grab on farmers in another massive embarrassment for under fire Chancellor Rachel Reeves. They now join Co-op, Tesco, Asda, Morrison's, Lidl and Aldi. Almost the full house. Let's speak now with the British farmer, Andrew Loftus. Andrew, welcome to the show. So, it seems the supermarkets are taking notice of the action you boys and girls are taking. How does that make you feel? Do you feel that momentum is on your side, or is this a token gesture and maybe the government won't listen?
Well, when did you last hear of all the supermarkets having the same position on something? And, you know, I think it's fair to say that normally the relationship between farmers and supermarkets is a little bit adversarial. I mean, we fight over price. It's a very competitive market for British farmers. So to see them all backing us like this and understanding the problem and raising it with government is good. It's great. I mean, we're not there yet, but this will be very helpful, and we're grateful for that support.
And Andrew, just to be clear, what the supermarkets are ostensibly saying here is that they are encouraging the Chancellor, perhaps the Prime Minister Keir Starmer, to sit down with British farmers and try and negotiate this deal, because that's what you want, right? I think you can all agree that those, if you like, pretend farmers, the big landowners, rich people who buy land and aren't really farming, and they are genuinely doing it as a way of dodging tax, they perhaps do deserve some further analysis. But you British farmers have always been saying that this blunderbuss approach means that even small holdings are caught in the crossfire, and you think that that is very unfair. So you're prepared to sit down with the government. The question is, are they prepared to dance with you? It takes two to tango.
That's exactly right. I mean, we're calling for a full consultation. Normally, tax changes of this magnitude go through a proper process where, you know, all sides are listened to. And like you've just said, there is a landing zone here where people who are sheltering wealth from outside farming in farmland, you know, that's fine. Tax them, but don't tax the nation's food production. So, you know, we need them to sit down with us and listen, because there is a middle way here, but so far they're being very intransigent. But even the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, the DEFRA Select Committee, they've all called for the government to look again at this, and we need a proper consultation, because that's what's normal when they change taxes on this scale.
And Andrew, what's precipitated this change of mood, it would seem, is that the farmers have been gradually stepping up your presence, as it were. We saw last Friday there were tractors parked in supermarket car parks around the country in a non-invasive way, wasn't blocking anybody from going about their business, interacting with customers, and we had farmers and customers on the show last Friday. Very, very positive mood on the ground. It is moving things forward. The supermarkets are probably thinking, we hope this doesn't escalate to the next stage towards blockades and the like. So for now, they've come out at least and verbally supported you. If the government, however, don't listen to that, could there be a more, I don't know, French-style approach to how the protests develop in the future?
Look, the public seems to be on our side. I mean, I went down to London in November and, on the train on the way down, the railway staff, everybody were really supportive of what we were doing. And the opinion polls show that the public are on our side. Even amongst Labour voters, they're on our side. So we don't want to upset. Our beef isn't with the public, if you pardon that pun. Our complaint is with the government, and we don't want to inconvenience British people. We think they're on our side, and what we want to do is feed them, actually not disrupt their food supply. So we have to think carefully about how we escalate this, trying to do it to minimum disruption for ordinary people. But at the same time, we need to be heard because, farming businesses can't stomach a bill. I mean, in my case, it would mean £75,000 a year for 10 years. I don't make that much profit in many years. So, farming can't stand this sort of tax.
And of course, Andrew, was seeing storms battering the country again. We had farmers on the show last week where great amounts of their land were underwater, mismanaged waterways, the Environment Agency not doing its bit, spoiling huge parts of Lincolnshire. It's just astonishing how fragile the landscape is, and that directly impacts an already squeezed margin. But is there another thing with supermarkets? Talk is cheap. Supporting you via, gestures towards the government is one thing, but what about doing something meaningful and actually giving you more money? Stop hammering the margins so much.
I'm not going to be drawn to criticising the supermarkets today. Look, I'm really grateful for what they've said. Obviously, farmers and supermarkets have a long-term, a competitive relationship. We'd always like to be paid better, but if we are not able to invest in our businesses, then over the long term we get less efficient, and we need more money. But what the supermarkets will do is bring in more imports. That is what will happen if we are not able to invest in our businesses and keep British food on the shelves. So this does become a food security issue for the country. I mean, not long ago we were at 80% self-sufficiency. About now it's about 62%. So all the food on the supermarket shelf, everything altogether, about 62% of it starts on a British farm. But I believe that figure has already dropped because of quite a few different pressures for environmental use of land. I'm not against that, by the way, done sensibly. So there's already a lag in those figures. And we're perilously close to 50%, I would suggest. And it's an unstable world. If the government really wants to see trouble, when people can't get food in the supermarkets, I mean, that is not a future any of us want. So we need a secure British supply base. And this sort of tax just can't be afforded by most family farms.
Okay, Andrew Loftus, we have to leave it there. For now, momentum from the supermarkets is with the British farmers. Thanks for joining us on the show and have a fantastic weekend. That's Andrew Loftus. Very much. You take care. Thank you. Now, if you're in search of some winter sun at the moment, who can blame you with the winds blowing out there? Then here is the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Unsettled at times across western parts of Europe. This includes Portugal, Spain and parts of northwest France. We're likely to see some heavy rain, also some strong winds at times. Largely settled across Tenerife, but Madeira, parts of Portugal, Spain, northwestern France could see some showers merging into longer spells of rain at times and also some strong winds. As we head further east, largely settled across Rome and also parts of Greece, but a chance we could see some showers here as we head into next week with the best of the temperatures across Tenerife.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Now, the Grenadier Guards are set to return to Buckingham Palace after 5 years in Iraq, the Middle East and the Falklands. That's next, and it's magnificent. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
And fashionistas are keen to see which new trends are set to hit the catwalk.
Well, our next guest is very well placed to share her predictions with us after being a contestant on hit ITV series Dress the Nation, as well as being an upcycling and sewing consultant.
Wow. Joining us now is Tendai Murewe. I want to go back to you appearing on the ITV Dress the Nation.
Right.
Tell us about that experience. What was that like?
Oh, that was one of my highlights as a upcycling consultant. I learned to sew in my kitchen 5 years ago. And then, during COVID, just making masks. Then the next thing I was on a Dress the Nation, making dresses in front of TV. Yeah, it was just incredible. I think we all had all these clothes that we have, but we don't know what to do with them. So mainly I started with men's jackets, taking off the sleeves and putting it like a print on.
I've tried this. I've tried taking off my sleeves before. I now have about 3 jackets with no sleeves. I never managed to put them back on.
You need to come to a workshop. You need to come to a workshop.
I need an upcycling consultant. 2025, what can we expect fashion-wise?
I think bold prints are back. People are loving. I think you walk on the streets in frollals and oversized men's jackets.
So the exact opposite. We have drastically underperformed this morning. You're just saying not like us.
We just woke up this morning and thought it's winter, it's cold, it's grey.
Grey, miserable.
Is that not the way to go?
No, it is. It's still, I think because fashion is expressive. It's whatever you want to express yourself.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back. It is 10 to 5 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, the Grenadier Guards are set to return to Buckingham Palace after 5 years on operational duty. Yesterday, the 1st Battalion Grenadier Guards were inspected to ensure they were ready to take up ceremonial public duties for His Majesty the King. Cameron Walker has the story.
The last time the 1st Battalion Grenadier Guards were protecting royal palaces, Queen Elizabeth II was still on the throne. Since 2020, they've been deployed to Iraq, the wider Middle East, and the Falkland Islands.
After 5 years in operational combat roles, these battle-hardened soldiers must now turn their skills to ceremonial perfection on behalf of the nation and the King, promoting Britain at its best.
And it's nothing short of perfection that's expected from the King and his Brigade Major of the Household Division. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Foynet is scrutinising every aspect of the Guardsmen's performance at their fit-for-role inspection at Lille Barracks in Aldershot. So what's his verdict?
Everything that is within the power of the soldiers has been done to an extremely high standard. The things we tend to be commenting on are things like fit of uniforms where perhaps some tailoring adjustment is required, or in 1 or 2 cases where bear skins are perhaps a little bit beyond their design life and are going a funny colour or could fit better. So it's really about providing the appropriate support to make sure that the soldiers and indeed the battalion get the support they require to perform to the highest standard.
Assuming the Brigade Major thinks they're fit for duty, the Grenadier Guards will take up positions at Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, the Tower of London and St James's Palace on Monday. As well as ceremonial guard changes, they'll help the King welcome visiting world leaders during high-profile state visits. In private, it's understood His Majesty often dines with his guardsmen, a particularly close bond he's developed as company commander of the King's Company. Captain Robin Mackworth-Young of the Grenadier Guards explains the relationship.
It's a huge privilege to have His Majesty as our Commander-in-Chief, and I know that he takes his responsibilities to not only us, but all of his regiments in the British Army very seriously. We feel a particular connection to the royal family, having been personally formed by King Charles II in exile in 1656, and that close relationship between the Grenadier Guards and the wider household division has remained extant for those 400 and something years.
This summer, the Grenadier Guards are expected to take part in the 80th anniversary commemorations for the end of the Second World War, supporting their Colonel, the Queen, and their Commander-in-Chief, the King. Cameron Walker, GB News, Aldershot.
Magnificent stuff. Now, loads of you have been getting in touch at gbnews.com/your say, because in the next hour, I'll be speaking with a Wigan councillor, Morin O'Burn, who has forced the council into a dramatic national inquiry on rape gangs. And Patricia says this: Wigan councillor Morin O'Burn is a legend. I'm a resident of Wigan, and Maureen has been working tirelessly to highlight the underhand tactics of the Labour Council even before she became a councillor. The only reason these councillors have voted for a national inquiry now is due to her making them do it. So we've got that coming up soon, and we've got the first interview with Nigel Farage since that poll came out, that for the first time ever, Reform UK lead in a national poll. Farage at 5. That's next. Here's your weather.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome to the latest from the Met Office for GB News. Storm Eowyn continues to move across the UK, bringing dangerous and damaging winds, with the strongest gusts during the rest of Friday moving north into central and northern Scotland. Here's where it's moving as we go through the afternoon. Northern Scotland seeing the strongest winds, having escaped so far, along with a spell of heavy rain and hill snow. Later in the evening, I think gusts of 80, perhaps 90 mile per hour are possible in the far north of Scotland, whilst the very strongest of the winds that we saw across central and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, North Wales, will be easing overnight. So conditions improving, but still a risk of disruption in the north of Scotland. Elsewhere across the UK, it's a cold start to the weekend because of lighter winds and clear skies. Perhaps some spots where we'll see ice and frost. And it will be cold across Scotland, particularly feeling cold with the strong wind continuing to blow. Frequent wintry showers over the hills and coasts. Northern Ireland also seeing one or two rain, sleet and snow showers moving in. But for England and Wales, it's sunny skies for the vast majority as we begin the weekend. Much lighter winds and actually a fine day to come for many parts of England, Wales, and then into southern and eastern Scotland. We're going to see mostly fair weather. Northern Ireland, a reasonable morning, but it turns cloudy and there'll be some lively rain and wind gusts moving in by the end of the afternoon. Meanwhile, the winds finally ease in the north of Scotland, but it stays cold and showery. Elsewhere, it's a fine winter's day, a real change compared with what we're experiencing through Friday. Now, Saturday evening does bring this weather front in the west further east, and it's going to be a gusty feature with some heavy rain for a time, perhaps some thunder. It does move through, and then on Sunday, a fine start, again a cold start, before more wind and rain move in from the southwest later.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. In Cumbria, the M6 northbound is partly blocked by an overturned lorry between junction 43 for Carlisle and 44 for the A689. In Merseyside, the M57 has been closed northbound after a tree fell onto the motorway between junction 1 for the M62 and junction 2 for Prescott. In Derbyshire, long delays on the M1 northbound. There are 2 lanes shut there for emergency repairs. They're taking place between junction 28 for Mansfield and junction 29 for Chesterfield. And in Kent, the M25 is partly blocked anti-clockwise at the Dartford tunnels. That's after a collision in the left-hand tunnel, so do expect queues on the approach there as well.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Imagine how £50,000 in cash from us could make your new year go with a bang.
Hi, my name's Victoria. I won the Spring Great British giveaway. So the day we got the money in our bank account, everything just felt a lot lighter. I would say if you're thinking about entering, just enter.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very, very good afternoon to you, and I hope you're having a marvellous Friday. It's 5 p.m, and welcome to the Morin O'Burn Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, we've got some breaking news because a bombshell poll has put Reform UK ahead of both Labour and the Conservatives for the first time ever. I'll be joined by Nigel Farage, the Reform UK leader, shortly for his immediate reaction to this historic breakthrough for the insurgent party. And in a huge victory for sexual abuse survivors, Labour-run Wigan Council has defied Keir Starmer and voted for a full national inquiry into rape gangs. I'll be joined by the heroic independent councillor who refused to be silenced. That's Morin O'Burn. She'll be joining me next. Might this be a national tipping point? And today, Waitrose became the latest supermarkets to throw their weight behind British farmers in what will be another huge embarrassment for under fire Chancellor Rachel Reeves. On today's show, I'll be joined by a farmer who says they've simply picked on the wrong target. That's all coming in your next hour. So breaking news in this past hour, Nigel Farage's Reform UK party has for the first time taken the lead in a national voting poll. If a general election were to be held tomorrow, Reform UK for the first time have gone to the front of the pack. Now, of course, it's only one poll, but it is nevertheless a significant moment. And to discuss that, for the first reaction from the leader of Reform UK, I'll be joined by Nigel Farage. That's coming soon. Let us know, can that outfit get forward? Is this just a blip? Who do you want to be the next Prime Minister? What does this country need to be saved? Get in touch. gbnews.com/your say. First is your headlines, and it's Sophia Hill.
Martin, thank you. Your top story, Storm Eowyn is sweeping across the UK, bringing record-breaking winds and severe weather conditions. 1 in 5 flights from airports in the UK and Ireland have been cancelled today, and millions of people have been urged to stay home. Forecasters have flagged a rare threat to life red weather warning. Over 4 million people across Northern Ireland and Scotland received emergency alerts from the Met Office last night with guidance on how to stay safe. More than 240,000 homes and businesses are without power in Northern Ireland, and a wind speed of 114 miles per hour brought by the storm has been recorded in Ireland, the fastest since records began. 20,000 Scottish Power customers across the centre and south of the country are without electricity, and a red danger to life warning for wind has been extended in Scotland, where more than 35,000 properties have lost power. Local authorities have warned commuters to avoid travel at all costs. And the Southport child killer will likely die behind bars after murdering 3 girls at a dance class, but his 52-year sentence has sparked calls for law changes. Axel Rudiger received one of the highest minimum custody terms on record for the attack in Southport in July last year when he was 17 years old. Alice da Silva Aguiar, BB King and Elsie Dot Stancombe were all killed, and harrowing details of the attack were heard at Liverpool Crown Court yesterday. However, Southport's Labour MP Patrick Hurley said the sentence was not severe enough, and he asked the Attorney-General to review it as unduly lenient. Due to Rudy Cabana's age at the time of the attack, he cannot legally receive a whole-life order. The head of the UK's largest police force has welcomed a review of contempt of court laws and said it would be great if more information in cases could be shared at an earlier stage. Defence Secretary John Healey told GB News Axel Rudy Cabana did not get a whole-life sentence because international law had prevented it.
The technicality of the whole-life sentences, I think it's important to know that the last government did reduce it to 18 in line with international law after the Manchester Arena bombings, and that still stands. There are a range of other aspects of law, of agencies who have failed in this case to step in. They knew about this man's extreme violence, but they failed to take any steps that might have prevented it. And there may be changes also in the programmes that are designed to deal with this sort of extremism. That's what the inquiry, now the court case has finished, which was launched this week, will do.
Meanwhile, a deal worth around £9 billion has been struck with Rolls-Royce by the government to help power Britain's nuclear submarines. The 8-year contract, dubbed Unity, is aimed at safeguarding 4,000 jobs and creating over 1,000 more, as well as bolstering national security and the UK economy. Defence Secretary John Healey said the agreement showed defence can be used as an engine for growth and a commitment to Britain's nuclear deterrent. The ministry estimates it will save more than £400 million over the full 8-year period by making delivery more efficient and offering incentives to produce more for no increase in costs. Scotland's first ever visitor levy for overnight stays has been approved by councillors in Edinburgh. Visitors in the city will have to pay a 5% fee per night, capped at 7 nights, which is expected to raise up to £50 million a year for the local authorities. The charge will be applied on bookings made after May 1st this year for accommodation stays from July 2026. And Hamas has announced the names of the 4 Israeli women soldiers to be released in the second swap under the ceasefire deal in Gaza. Karina Ariev, Daniela Gilboa, Naama Levy and Liri Albag are all to be released tomorrow. The terror group says it will be in exchange for 180 Palestinian prisoners and detainees who are being held by Israel. It's the second exchange since the ceasefire came into effect last Sunday. 3 hostages and 90 prisoners were released in the first swap. And 2 giant pandas have made their public debut at the Smithsonian's National Zoo in Washington, D.C. A zoo volunteer says Bao Li, a male whose name translates to active and vital power, and King Bao, a female whose name means green and treasure, have already won the hearts of our staff and volunteers. The pandas, both 3 years old, make their much welcomed return after a 15-month absence. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More in half an hour.
Thank you, Sophia. Now, it's some breaking news for you now because a shock bombshell new poll has, for the first time, puts Reform UK ahead of both the Labour Party and the Tories. The poll by Find Out Now asked the question, if a general election was called tomorrow, then who would you vote for? And 26% in front there said Reform UK. And then behind them in second, 23% said the Conservatives. And trailing in third is the party in power, the party of government. 22% said the Labour Party. And let's bring in GB News political editor Chris Hope on this. Chopper, quite a moment. It's just one poll after all, but nevertheless, the first time Farage's outfit have nosed into pole position. Tell us more. What's been the reaction?
Before the reaction, let's put this poll into some context. According to a seat model promoted by Find Out Now, they say Reform would be the biggest party in Parliament, based on these numbers, 190 MPs. Labour, 161. Wow. Conservative, 141. Wow. Lib Dems unchanged around 71, SNP 46 up 37. It would basically force Reform and the Conservatives to merge post-election if this result happened.
So this would be a hung Parliament situation with no overall majority,
Correct.
but the whip hand being held by Reform.
And probably forming an alliance with Conservatives. Now, that is fascinating because all the talk on the right of politics is will Reform and the Conservatives merge? Last week, I asked that exact question to Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, and this is what she told me for GB News.
Nigel Farage says he wants to destroy the Conservative Party. Why on earth would we merge with that? Policies without plans are just announcements. What the Labour Party has been doing, what Reform is doing, is making announcements. We did that as well, and people didn't like it. We're not going to start making promises without plans, not just going on TV and saying what we would like to do. That is not serious.
That's Kemi Badenoch there. Now, in my podcast overnight called Chopper's Political Podcast, I spoke to Lord Frost, David Frost. He's a thinker. He devised the Boris Johnson Brexit deal.
Mr Brexit, yep.
Yeah, he's not talking with the authority of the leadership, but here's his view on whether Reform and the Tory party may need to come together pre-election.
Is a merger inevitable between the Reform and the Conservative Party pre-election?
I think, no, I don't think it is inevitable. I think it's possible that one or other party could come out on top and get a decisive lead, and then politics has to accommodate to that. If it doesn't happen, then there's got to be some sort of arrangement or whatever, because we can't allow Labour to win again on a third of the vote. And I personally don't think it's right to rubbish, for Conservatives to rubbish Reform figures, or even more so, people who voted for Reform. And I don't think it's particularly wise for Reform to do that either. We need to be building agreement and understanding between each other, not, digging the trench even deeper. And there's some signs that's happening, and I don't particularly feel comfortable with it, I must say. Maybe that will be achieved by one party winning out over the other, or maybe it will be through some sort of deal, and it's too soon to be sure yet.
Lord Frost, David Frost, saying it's too soon right now to work out what will happen. He thinks if one party's far ahead, the other one falls in behind. If they're still going hammer and tongs, there might be an arrangement. Now, Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK, he has put on social media, Reform leads for the first time in a national opinion poll. This is just the beginning. Zia Youssef, the party chairman, says no deals, no pacts. They think they're heading for government. Now, the other two parties have responded to us, and this doesn't always happen. Parties are reluctant to talk about polls because of the nature of they can go up and down. And this is only an outlier, one single poll. Of course, all the pollsters may have different data, different results. But a spokesman for Kemi Badenoch has told me for GB News, polls go up and down and change every week. We're focused on what matters, the damage Labour is doing to the economy. She says our schools and our international standing. The Labour Party won't comment on the record, but a Labour source says to me this hour, the Labour government is getting on with delivering the plan for change. We've been clear from the outset. That means taking the tough decisions needed to undo 14 years of Tory chaos and decline. And just finally, while the opposition fight amongst themselves, they mean the Tories and Reform, the Labour government is putting in the hard yards to deliver much-needed growth, create more jobs, make people better off by putting more money in people's pockets, rebuild Britain and get our NHS back on its feet. It is all kicking off this Friday afternoon, Martin.
And they can say polls don't matter, but it's worth looking at the trend from this polling company. You go back and look at the last 6 polls and aggregate them, going back to November, and the trend is this. Conservatives -4 points, Labour -3 points, and Reform UK +4 points. So the clear trend over the past couple of months is the Conservatives going into reverse, the Labour Party not getting any traction, the honeymoon is over and they're going further behind. And meanwhile, all aboard the Farage Express is the poll momentum. Now, that's just polling. And is it interesting now that Frosty the No Man, as we used to call him, when he negotiated with Barnier, is now putting on a warm front towards Farage's outfit? Because actually, is this showing us that perhaps the Tories will need to do a deal? Well, that polling there puts them in a place of having to do a deal. They're going to become the new Nick Clegg.
Well, but they'll be second, not third, which is Lib Dems be third.
I mean, if they want to do a pact to form a government in a hung parliament...
And he's talking in the context of these remarks.
Kelly will be the Nick Clegg.
Suella Braverman, the former Tory Home Secretary, says something similar to the Telegraph on Tuesday, and that's the context of what Lord Frost is saying. The talk amongst those on the right of the Tory party is how can we get together their joint enemy, the two parties, is Labour, what they would say Labour is doing to the economy. We are hearing from Nigel Farage at 5:35 p.m. today to react for the first time to this moment. It's a real moment for his party. Don't forget, I know when you were with Brexit Party back in 2019, the party won the European parliamentary elections, but this is a moment for Farage, and maybe the boost he needs. He's come back to a sort of soggy Britain after being in the States there for that inauguration.
Yeah, to come back from boom time America to perhaps doom time UK with the storm blowing. Nigel Farage has certainly got the wind in his sails.
But the party has 5 MPs, by the way, miles behind.
Long way to go.
Long way to go, and it's a long way for the election. But it could be a moment we might look back as a flash in the pan or the beginning of something quite interesting for that party.
OK, Farage will be on the show 5:35, and I know, Chris, you'll be back here to give Mr Farage a thorough grilling. Thank you. Always a pleasure to have you in the studio. Now, moving on. There's been huge embarrassment for Sir Keir Starmer as a cabinet member's constituency has voted for a national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal. The Labour-led Wigan Council last night broke with the government's position following Stockton Council. And GBNews' national reporter Charlie Peters joins us now. Charlie, it feels we're talking about a moment here with Reform UK breaking through. This feels like a moment. It feels like momentum seems to be on the side of more and more councils going rogue. This time, a huge embarrassment for Labour-led Wigan. Tell us more.
Well, it's embarrassment potentially for the government, not Labour-led Wigan, because they're breaking with the party, breaking with the government to make this unanimous demand in the council this morning, which comes after on Wednesday evening, Stockton Council, another Labour-run authority, has done the same. So in the weeks after the Labour government said their position that they were in favour of locally led inquiries, but against another, they say, national inquiry, it seems that some of their own authorities around the country do not agree. It comes also in the same week that Bradford Council voted against a local inquiry. So 3 councils voting against the government's position in different ways. What you're seeing on your screen now is Councillor Morin O'Burn, who was delivering her motion or attempting to do so on Wednesday evening as Labour councillors left the chamber. Now, the council have said today that there was space for this motion, but they ran over the 3 hours allocated, and consequently they gathered again today to vote on the motion. However, there was no time made to debate it today either. Labour councillors voting against a debate, but in favour of the motion. Quite a curious position, you might suggest. So, some strange ongoings in the national grooming gangs debate. We've got a Labour government saying that they back local inquiries. You've got Labour authorities voting against local inquiries, and 2 Labour-run authorities this week saying that they actually back a national statutory investigation, which, as you know, Martin, is what survivors and campaigners and their families have been arguing for some time, especially those that we've spoken to, because it's only through a national investigation and a statutory inquiry that people are compelled to give evidence, and people, they say, can be held to account. It's not just the perpetrators that they want to see investigated and locked up, it's also those who covered up the abuse and the social services, police officers and local officials who failed them so often across so many years.
Charlie, it's been quite a week. Bradford doing what many think will be the wrong thing, and Wigan doing the right thing. Thank you, Charlie, because no doubt a huge amount of that pressure is because of your excellent, exemplary work on keeping shining a light on this. Charlie Peters, magnificent. Thank you very, very much. And talking of magnificent, let's now speak with the woman of the moment, the heroic councillor who put forward the motion in Wigan, and that is Councillor Morin O'Burn. Maureen, a magnificent result. And earlier in the week, when they disgracefully walked out on you, wouldn't even allow you to talk, that was a low point. And now this has happened, and you must feel immensely proud. Tell us more.
I'm just really delighted that Wigan Council have voted for a national inquiry and they're going to take the government to task on it. Those girls deserve justice, and that's what this is all about. They went through horrific times, and until they get proper justice, this is not going to go away, this issue. And I've been interested in this for a few years. I'm quite shocked that in a 20th century, there was girls in this country being sold really into sex slavery, and officials, local authorities, like you said, the police, social services, wouldn't listen to them, and nothing was done about it. It's a very sad state of affairs.
And Maureen, we'll get that footage back on the screen of you attempting to get your debate going. Was that a couple of days ago on Wednesday?
Yeah, it was Wednesday.
And the Labour councillors simply walked away. They said, oh, you know, the debate had ended. If I was a councillor, a decent person, you'd think would stay behind and listen. Now, as I understand it, even today, you weren't allowed to read out your statement. I've got your full statement here. You kindly sent it through, and it contains, of course, some of that extremely harrowing evidence from the Oxford rape gang testimony. The evidence, actually, which I think has helped to change this debate globally, that was picked up by Elon Musk. The barbarity, the cruelty, the grotesque truth that is starting to emerge. You have held that to the council. What do you think it is that's made them do a change of position like this? I mean, they didn't want to do this, they didn't want to go ahead, and now they have. Is it just your dogged pressure?
I think partially, and I think a lot of it is the public pressure, because I have put things out on social media, and I'd say 90% of people agree with me. So Wigan Council they're voted in by the local people. They're the ones they should be listening to, not following a party line, doing the right thing, getting justice for those girls. And hopefully it'll be a start and other Labour councils will follow suit. And it is an embarrassment for Keir Starmer. Why would anybody not want a full investigation into these crimes that went on in our country for decades? It's hard to comprehend. I mean, they didn't let me speak. I just don't know why we weren't allowed to speak on the motion. The motion wasn't even read out. I think that's been the problem over the years. It is horrible. It's unpleasant to listen to, but it needs to be said. Those girls' voices need to be heard, and they need justice. And I think we should be speaking about these things, however hard that is.
Well, Maureen, they didn't want to hear this because it contains truth so painful. The entire political establishment has tried to bury it, but I think they're failing. I think they can't contain it anymore. I think the truth is too significant. The facts are too sombre. And as you said, the public mood too great to be ignored. But you said something pertinent there, Councillor O'Burn. Who would want to vote against an inquiry? Well, the answer is the MP for Wigan, Lisa Nandy. She, as a minister in the Cabinet, she voted against a full national inquiry in Parliament a couple of years ago. This latest announcement today, a Labour councillor not only defying the Prime Minister, but defying their own MP. It must be a huge embarrassment for Miss Nandy.
Well, I am going to be writing to Lisa Nandy, and I'm going to be asking all the people of Wigan to write to their MPs, because we do have 2 other MPs in the area as well. But I think Lisa Nandy should back Wigan Council and back the people who have voted her in, and they want a national inquiry. People need to break all this party line, do the right thing. Don't be guided by your principles and not by your party. And I am going to call strongly on her to start supporting this. Support the motion, try to get Keir Starmer to have a national inquiry. I think the momentum's starting, and I don't think it's going away. I am at the march that was on earlier in Liverpool on the 17th of February, hoping to get a lot of people there. Come along and join us. You can come with me if there's any ladies in Wigan who want to come. If a country can't protect its children, what kind of country is it? That's the way
Maureen,
I see it.
It's just so beautiful to hear you say this. It makes me feel like so happy, you know. Out of all this darkness that's been around these cases for so long, and what we've heard this week in Southport, it's been a very, very testing week. It's just so wonderful to hear people like yourself, you know, refusing to take no for an answer and keep on driving, keep on trucking, and you made them listen. You held them to account. And I just really, really want to salute you. I really do want to salute you for what you've done, and to everybody else on the... Now, listen, honestly, and whatever everybody else has done on the council. What would you like to say to the survivors out there? Because that's what this is all about. Put the politics to one side. What would you like to say to the survivors in your area and about the justice that they so richly deserve?
I'd like to say I can't imagine what you went through, you girls, who had to put up with this, who weren't listened to, who were already poor, you were already vulnerable, and you were exploited by these men. You deserve justice, and I'm hoping lots and lots more councillors, MPs. Maggie Oliver has just done an amazing job. And even though I may not say it, Tommy Robinson is now in prison. He's made documentaries along with the wonderful one made by Charlie Peters. Watch what really happened. It's upsetting, it's hard, but I think unless it's out there, people just brush it under grooming gangs. They were rape and torture gangs, and it needs to be addressed. And those who covered it up need to be held to account, just as do the perpetrators.
OK, just had to point out that, of course, Tommy Robinson is in jail for contempt of court. But look, he undoubtedly did early work on grooming gangs at a time when nobody else would. And, you know, if people had been listened to much, much earlier, perhaps we wouldn't have to be in the situation of decades of neglect, of decades of the issue failing to be grasped. And that's where we are now. But Morin O'Burn, hopefully we're turning a corner and we can start to push towards some justice. You know, not all heroes wear capes, and they're not all called Morin O'Burn. But look, thank you very, very much for joining us on today's show. It's an absolute pleasure, darling. Cheers. Thank you very, very much. Now, we've got a reply here from the leader of Wigan Council, and that's Councillor David Molyneux, who told GB News this. Our intention was always to support this motion from the outset. I also welcome that the council's leader of the opposition has written to the mayor to apologise for his colleague's outburst that led to the adjournment. That's concluded the meeting. Now, coming up, we've got a GB News exclusive next, and that is King's College London has been criticised for clear evidence of bias. Can you believe it? They're hiring far-right fact-checkers to delve around looking for trouble. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Lauren, let's start with this, shall we? How children's TV may be harming, not helping young minds.
Yeah, so this is an article in the Express today, a big double-page spread as a result of some new research and a new book that's coming out by a child psychologist, saying that children's television, and I think perhaps more importantly, the way that children consume television and video product now is perhaps not as healthy for them as we would hope it would be. And there's quite some distance from children's television of the past, of the sort of the Bagpuss and Clangers and Ivor the Engine era. And I think what's interesting about this is particularly the how children's television is consumed angle, because children are now put in front of screens significantly more often than they were, certainly when I think we were growing up. The content that they are consuming is not great for their brains and their learning and development, which Floella Benjamin of children's television fame is now leading a big crusade to say that some of this is really, really bad for children.
These days, they're not watching the TV that we all watched when we were growing up. They're not even watching GB News in the morning.
What are they thinking?
Would you believe it? But they are watching this absolute drivel all day long on YouTube, and because obviously all our TVs are now connected to the internet, or they're getting TikTok on their TV. It's not even, so they don't even necessarily have to have smartphones or iPads. They can just watch this stuff on TV, and it is rubbish. They are watching it and they're obsessed with it. Oh God, Skibbity Toilet or something. Have you heard of this?
No.
No? Well, you'll have viewers who have got who are parents of sort of 13-year-olds, and this Skibbity Toilet thing is, they're all obsessed with it, and this is a really annoying sort of theme tune or thing that they sing at you.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:27 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, King's College London has been criticised for clear evidence of bias after spending taxpayers' money investigating far-right extremism while failing to research the far left. Well, joining me now to discuss this, GB News exclusive by my colleague Keith Bayes as the former Immigration Minister, Kevin Foster. Kevin, welcome to the show. So, no real surprises, I guess, here. We know that academia is riddled with bias towards exposing the far right. They've actually spent money on an intern to sniff out the far right. What on earth is going on?
Well, you're right to say, Martin, that just too many academics and commentators just refuse to accept the fact that the far left are the other side of the coin of hatred of the far right. You know, they're all anti-democratic, they're both anti-Semitic, and they don't believe in freedom of speech and free media. You know, some of the people who'll be attacking GB News would be attacking others. And it's about really getting this understanding, is that it's not just a journey to the right that takes you to extremism, it's a journey to the left as well. You know, we see people like the Israeli ambassador being mobbed at events, when we see some of the disgraceful comments we've seen at some of these hate marches in London on a Saturday. You know, those aren't far right people showing up, those are far left, and we need to work on that as much as we do the threat from the far right extremism.
Yeah, it's interesting, Kevin. The King's College is the home for the International Centre for Radicalisation. I used to go there and do some work. I worked on exposing Islamist extremism in Britain when there was jihad, when Brits were joining ISIS, and the Trojan horse scandal. They weren't that interested in that. They were really, really interested, actually, in exposing the far right. And isn't this the problem? If they were displaying the same academic rigour towards all extremism, and by the way, if Prevent did the same thing, we might have picked up Axel Radicabana. Isn't that the point? They're obsessed with the far right when they're missing the actual terror that's right under their noses.
Absolutely. You know, we do. You know, this is not about saying we shouldn't tackle a far right threat. This is about saying we should recognise that there is a far left one as well, and that we do need to challenge. You know, those who were busily covering up for grooming gangs were not generally UKIP Conservative councillors, were they? They were people on the left of politics who were covering up for much of what was going on. So, no, we do need to accept that, you know, politics isn't a straight line with the far left and the far right and exactly opposites. It's a circle, and the far left and the far right come together, anti-democratic, anti-Semitic, and against free speech. And you've only got to look at the comments that, let's say, far right activists who support Tommy Robinson make about Nigel, far left make about Keir Starmer, and those more in the centre of politics. You know, to know that there are some real threats there. And you know, I haven't been on the receiving end of the type of abuse sometimes the far left dish out. You know, I struggle to see how academic institution wanting to genuinely understand extremist threats to democracy in this country thinks they only need to go in one direction.
Yeah, and when you look at the actual aggro and abuse on our streets, I don't know, since October the 7th, a couple of years ago, then actually maybe it's the far left that's causing most of the trouble. Thank you very much, Kevin Foster. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. Now, it's worth pointing out that we approached King's College London for a comment towards our exclusive, and they didn't respond. Well, there you go. Thank you very, very much. Now, loads more to come between now and 6 o'clock, including after the news. We'll be joined by Reform UK leader Nigel Farage. He'll join us next as the bombshell poll puts Reform UK ahead of both the Labour Party and the Tories for the first time ever. That's next. First, here's your headlines with Sophia Hill.
Martin, thank you. Your top story, Storm Eowyn is sweeping across the UK, bringing record-breaking winds and severe weather conditions. 1 in 5 flights from airports in the UK and Ireland have been cancelled today, and millions of people have been urged to stay home. Forecasters have flagged a rare threat-to-life red weather warning. Over 4 million people across Northern Ireland and Scotland received emergency alerts from the Met Office last night with guidance on how to stay safe. More than 240,000 homes and businesses are without power in Northern Ireland, and a wind speed of 114 miles per hour brought by the storm has been recorded in Ireland, the fastest since records began. 20,000 Scottish Power customers across the centre and the south of the country are without electricity, and a red danger to life warning for wind has been extended in Scotland, where more than 35,000 properties have lost power. Local authorities have warned commuters to avoid travel at all costs. And the Southport child killer will likely die behind bars after murdering 3 girls at a dance class, but his 52-year sentence has sparked calls for law changes. Axel Rudikabana received one of the highest minimum custody terms on record for the attack in Southport in July last year when he was 17 years old. Alice De Silva Aguiar, BB King and Elsie Dodd-Stankham were all killed, and harrowing details of the attack were heard at Liverpool Crown Court yesterday. However, Southport's Labour MP Patrick Hurley said the sentence was not severe enough, and he asked the Attorney-General to review it as unduly lenient. Due to Rudikabana's age at the time of the attack, he cannot legally receive a whole-life order. The head of the UK's largest police force has welcomed a review of contempt of court laws and said it would be great if more information in cases could be shared at an earlier stage. And Scotland's first ever visitor levy for overnight stays has been approved by councillors in Edinburgh. Visitors staying in the city will have to pay a 5% fee per night, capped at 7 nights, which is expected to raise up to £50 million a year for the local authority. The charge will be applied on bookings made after the 1st of May this year for accommodation stays starting in July 2026. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi there, welcome to the latest from the Met Office for GB News. Storm Eowyn continues to move across the UK, bringing dangerous and damaging winds, with the strongest gusts during the rest of Friday moving north into central and northern Scotland. Here's where it's moving as we go through the afternoon. Northern Scotland seeing the strongest winds, having escaped so far, along with a spell of heavy rain and hill snow. Later in the evening, I think gusts of 80, perhaps 90 mile per hour are possible in the far north of Scotland, whilst the very strongest of the winds that we saw across central and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, North Wales, will be easing overnight. So conditions improving, but still a risk of disruption in the north of Scotland. Elsewhere across the UK, it's a cold start to the weekend because of lighter winds and clear skies. Perhaps some spots where we'll see ice and frost. And it will be cold across Scotland, particularly feeling cold with the strong wind continuing to blow. Frequent wintry showers over the hills and coasts. Northern Ireland also seeing 1 or 2 rain, sleet and snow showers moving in. But for England and Wales, it's sunny skies for the vast majority as we begin the weekend. Much lighter winds and actually a fine day to come for many parts of England, Wales and then into southern and eastern Scotland. We're going to see mostly fair weather. Northern Ireland, a reasonable morning, but it turns cloudy and there'll be some lively rain and wind gusts moving in by the end of the afternoon. Meanwhile, the winds finally ease in the north of Scotland, but it stays cold and showery. Elsewhere, it's a fine winter's day, a real change compared with what we're experiencing through Friday. Now, Saturday evening does bring this weather front in the west further east, and it's going to be a gusty feature with some heavy rain for a time, perhaps some thunder. It does move through, and then on Sunday, a fine start, again a cold start, before more wind and rain move in from the southwest later.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Several motorways are closed in Scotland as Storm Eowyn makes landfall. The M9 in Falkirk remain shut northbound from junction 8 to 9, just off the M80 south of Stirling. And the M8 is closed westbound from junction 5 to 6A east of Glasgow after a lorry overturned in the strong winds. The M74 in South Lanarkshire is shut northbound from junction 13 to 11 south of Larkhill. A lorry also overturned. And the A1 in East Lothian is also closed near Dunbar. In Cumbria, the M6 is down to a single lane northbound from junction 43 to 44 towards Carlisle after a lorry overturned. The M57 on Merseyside is shut northbound from junction 1 to 2 near Prescott after a tree came down. And the M2 in Antrim is closed eastbound from the M22 to the Antrim Hospital north of Antrim after a tree came onto the motorway. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. 5:37 is your time. Now I've got some breaking news for you. A new poll has for the first time put Reform UK ahead of both the Labour Party and the Conservatives. And I'm delighted to say we can now speak with the leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage, welcome to the show. So, a breakthrough moment for the first time ever. You're in pole position. How does it feel?
Yeah, very good indeed, and well timed. I've got a big event here in Clacton this evening, so I hope this news will go down well. Do you know what? All the momentum in British politics is with Reform. Why? I think it's because we're optimistic. We believe that with the right leadership, this country can be turned around. I also think many of our potential voters are seeing what's happening in America, where woke is out of the window, DEI people are being suspended, and the economic optimism in America has much to do with the leadership. So, yeah, it's about being optimistic. It's about having real plans. It's about being unafraid to stand up and say things that many in Westminster find awkward and difficult, but out in the country are right at the heart of the debate families, communities are having.
Okay, Mr. Farage, I'm joined by Chris Hope in the studio. He'd like to fire a question at you.
Nigel Farage, I do my podcast called Chopper's Political Podcast. You've been on before, you know about it. Lord Frost, David Frost, has said to us today he thinks there needs to be a coming together in some way of Reform and the Tory party. An arrangement maybe, if you're both level pegging at the election, or maybe one of you merges the other one into it. I mean, look at the numbers there. You get 190 MPs if an election tomorrow. Conservatives 141. So you'll be anyway forming a government with Reform, with the Tory party if this comes to pass. Why not start the talks now?
So lots of speculation about, where is Reform's support coming from? Is it coming from the Conservatives? Is it coming from Labour? Well, overall, there's more coming to us from Labour in the red wall than the Conservatives. But here's the really important point, Chris. The really important point, the reason we're in the lead is 20% of our vote is coming from people who did not vote for anybody in the last general election. And that tells you a lot. It tells you about the level of disenchantment there is with, frankly, the Uniparty. There isn't much to choose on the really big issues between the Conservatives' record in government and what Labour are doing now. I mean, mark you, Labour are even more incompetent, if you can believe that. So what we're getting here is something completely fresh and brand new happening in politics. Now, over the course of the last 2 weeks, I've received phone calls and texts from people who have been consistently publicly abusive about me for the last quarter of a century. Why are you wasting your time? Leave it to us Conservatives. We'll sort the mess out for you. And actually, far from sorting the mess out, they would never, ever have even given us a referendum on EU membership if I hadn't put pressure upon them. Then they promised me, once it was done, that they control immigration to allow net up to 1 million people a year to come into our country. Now those people who told me to pack my bags and go home now say, let's have a deal. Well, the reason they're doing that is they know their support is on the slide. And if you look at places like Wales, where you see we're now over 12 points ahead of the Conservatives, they fear that when voters see that actually Reform is the credible party of opposition against Labour, they fear their poll numbers could collapse. So when it comes to doing a deal with people that in 2019 I trusted and gave a pass to, and who let me down and the country down, no thank you very much indeed.
Nigel, could I ask you about your time in America? I mean, it was astonishing scenes, a genuinely revolutionary speech from Donald Trump, many people were just saying this is just off the charts in terms of nation first, blowing woke out of the water. Did you pick up any tips? Have you more to the point, bumped into anybody out there who might give you a few quid as to Mr. Musk? Is the bromance back on?
Well, look, as far as Musk is concerned, we're in talks. We're perfectly friendly. We have different views on some things, but Martin, I don't get pushed around by anybody, not even the richest man in the world. I know what I believe in. I know what my principles are. We're on good, friendly terms. What was really interesting with that big speech that Trump gave, and what an amazing speech it was, uplifting, positive, about nation, about family, about community, about law and order. What was remarkable is I then reread the Reform UK contract with the people from the last general election. So many issues on which we're aligned with Trump and which the American people have just voted for in large numbers. And I think they're going to begin to do that here. Are there things I can learn from him? Well, I've got to tell you, I don't think you're going to see me at a Reform conference with village people on stage and me dancing with them. I'll leave that one to him. But joking aside, the optimism that I was getting from taxi drivers, from bartenders, people feeling, wow, we're off to the races, we're going to make money, we're going to do well, there's a renewed confidence in America. And you come back here where everything, frankly, is as miserable as sin. The contrast could not be greater. We're about providing optimism, we're about providing solutions, and we're very much of the mind that the old two-party system that has governed us since 1918 is now no longer fit for purpose. Britain is broken. Britain needs reform.
And Nigel Farage, you were in America. Donald Trump had the village people. You're back to London. We got Sadiq Khan. You got the village idiot.
Well, I have to say, it's very poor of you, in my professional opinion, to call him Sadiq Khan. He is, of course, Sir Sadiq Khan, who's done such a wonderful job for London. Isn't it amazing? But there you are. Is it any wonder people are giving up on the old parties?
OK, back to Chris.
But, I mean, obviously, you can't get ahead of yourselves here. You've been around for long enough to see polls go up and polls go down. I mean, the other parties are saying this is only a poll. I mean, there's no trend here yet, is there? You're on 5 MPs. You're way behind the Tories on over 120, and, of course, Labour's landslide. I mean, there's a huge distance to go between now and the election. And how will you maintain this momentum?
I haven't mentioned the poll, Chris. You have. All I said is we have got the momentum in British politics. Now, you're quite right. Politics is a game of snakes and ladders, and you can think you're doing terribly well, get to number 86 and go back down to 37. That can happen. I know that. Right now, what I see is we're building, we're professionalising, we're selecting our candidates with rigour, and I just think events are coming our way. You're quite right. To maintain a lead for the next 4 years or whatever it is until the next general election won't be an easy thing to do. And I'm quite sure that the establishment won't exactly come out with a tray of gin and tonics. They'll be very, very worried about us and our strength. But I can just see a political movement that is building across this country that has terrific enthusiasm, knows what it wants to do. And, Chris, ask me again in 6 months or a year. But something very big is happening here. Don't underestimate that.
Nigel Farage, when you look at the previous 6 polls from the same company, there is that momentum thing. The Conservative has slipped by 4 points, the Labour Party have slipped by 3 points, and Reform UK have gone up by 4 points if you aggregate the last 2 months' 6 polls. So there does seem to be that momentum going on. Zia Yousaf keeps saying he believes you are going to be the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Do you believe that? Do you believe you can do that? And are you up for the job?
Well, the history books say, of course, we can't win the next election because no one new has ever come along before and done that. And it took the Labour Party 30 years to form their first government in 1924. But we're living through different times. We're living through a communication age with social media and much else where we can access information and make our own minds up in a way that we never, ever did before. Can we do it? Yes. And if we get there, would I be up for it? You bet your life.
Okay, Nigel, as I have you here, could I just get a quick reaction to you about the political aftermath of the Southport murder trial yesterday? Sir Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch both playing politics straight after that. What's your take on how things have been handled, what it means for the future of the country, particularly with Prevent and their huge failings?
Well, I mean, our ability to stop terrorists is dismal. But I think what's even worse is the cover-up. You know, Kemi Badenoch knew the identity of this guy. The Labour Party knew the identity of this guy. All I did was ask a simple question. Why are we not being told the truth? Is this man known to the authorities? And for daring to ask that question, I got absolute vilification and hatred, which came from senior politicians and many mainstream broadcasters and newspaper columnists. I was right all along. And if the public had known the truth about this guy, crazy conspiracies would not have spread online, and those riots would have been nowhere near as bad as they were. And I just think, once again, we come across issues like this where the establishment haven't got the courage to face up to it. All Keir Starmer can do is talk about the far right. Well, what about some of the evil ideologies that are allowed to persist within our community? This young man, you know, 10 times was stopped taking a knife to school, had said extreme things. And the fact that he was free to go and commit those murders is an absolute tragedy. Trouble is, I don't really have confidence that Prevent or the government can do much about it. And for the Crown Prosecution Service to tell the police, to tell the Merseyside police not to give the basic background information about this man, that's a real disgrace. And the head of the CPS, his head should roll.
Okay, Nigel Farage, thank you very much for joining us today on GB News. Reacting to that bombshell report, the poll that Reform UK for the first time is in the lead in a national poll. Nigel Farage, thank you very much for joining us on the show. Now, in response to the poll, a Labour Party source has said this: the Labour government is getting on with delivering the plan for change. We've been clear from the outset that that means taking the tough decisions. Now, in a huge embarrassment for the government, another supermarket giant has backed British farmers. That's next with me, Martin Daubney on GB News, Business News Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Ironic article in The Guardian, Nick, caring about facts.
Yeah, this is Meta is ushering in a world without facts, says Nobel Peace Prize winner. And they just seem to give these Nobel Peace Prizes to anyone these days. It's Maria Ressa.
Not working.
Zuckerberg came out, and it was very bold. He said a few things. We're going to use community notes instead of fact-checkers. Fact-checkers in inverted commas, it just means people pushing usually a specific viewpoint. Community notes seems to be a great system that X uses, so why not do that? I think that's great. He's going to reduce restrictions on topics like immigration and gender. Good, because I'm against censorship. He's going to push back on governments around the world that are going after American companies and pushing to censor more, which is great. He's also moving content moderation to Texas instead of California, which is banter. So now the cynical version is he's just realises we've got a new regime, it's the MAGA era, and I want to be mates with Trump, who said that I should that if I interfere with the 2024 election, he should spend the rest of his life in prison. So he did mention he might be a bit scared of that. He was involved in that in Facebook suppressing the Hunter Biden laptop scandal, and I feel that he didn't like being a part of all that from watching interviews.
And also the suppression of arguments about gender and sex, what is biological sex and whatnot. You get banned for saying there are two sexes.
They're on the wrong side of this, and now he's correcting. But the weird thing is the people, of course, the people who don't like this, the lefties, this person, Ressa, is saying that this is a big problem. It's an extremely dangerous time. I've seen all this from the lefties. They just call it disinformation. They're worried about this because to them it's disinformation. To other people, it's information.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I think we can all agree if people think they're getting their facts just directly from Facebook, then something's horribly wrong. But we know that. The community notes thing, I think, is quite good because that sort of first-hand experience people are putting down, aren't they?
Yeah. People have loads of different views come together, and it's an aggregate, so that's why it works.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Welcome back. It's 8 minutes to 6. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, Waitrose are the latest supermarket to back British farmers. And joining me now to celebrate this news is the farmer, Martin Williams. Martin, welcome to the show. So, another supermarket has done the right thing. How does it make you feel?
I think it's really, really positive, and it's great to see an industry coming together against what is, quite frankly, a ridiculous situation that we've been put in. It's so encouraging to see that all sides of the industry now really pulling to try and get some dialogue with the government, because the dialogue just seems to be what's missing. I've spent plenty of time talking to you, but unfortunately, the industry seems to have no time from the government.
OK, Martin, we've got a quick 50 seconds. So the supermarkets are behind you. Do you think the government will sit down and negotiate with you?
Well, I hope so. I mean, that's got to be the aim, hasn't it? We can't sit in this impasse forever. I mean, surely to goodness, they must have seen the feeling that's out on the street. As you can see on your pictures, you've seen tractors all across the country. Farmers are pretty pacific people. They're not that grumpy. Unfortunately, they are grumpy at the moment, and I can't see this noise quietening down until we get some style of dialogue.
OK, Martin Williams, a quick blast there, a tractor boy to end the week. Thank you very, very much. Mind how you go. A great victory for you. They've been campaigning long and hard. Thanks for joining us. Have a great weekend, Martin Williams. Now, that's all from me, but don't worry. Up next is Jubes & Co. with Michelle Dewberry, the fiercest debate show in town. Thanks for joining us this week, and thanks for all your amazingly kind comments about our coverage of the Southport trial to both myself and Mark White and Sophie Reaper and the entire team behind the scenes. And thanks for all the money you've donated this week to the Southport families. It's been amazing. Have a fantastic weekend. I love you all. And here's your weather. Have a great weekend.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome to the latest from the Met Office for GB News. Storm Eowyn continues to move across the UK, bringing dangerous and damaging winds, with the strongest gusts during the rest of Friday moving north into central and northern Scotland. Here's where it's moving as we go through the afternoon. Northern Scotland seeing the strongest winds, having escaped so far, along with a spell of heavy rain and hill snow. Later in the evening, I think gusts of 80, perhaps 90 mile per hour are possible in the far north of Scotland, whilst the very strongest of the winds that we saw across central and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, North Wales, will be easing overnight. So conditions improving, but still a risk of disruption in the north of Scotland. Elsewhere across the UK, it's a cold start to the weekend because of lighter winds and clear skies. Perhaps some spots where we'll see ice and frost. And it will be cold across Scotland, particularly feeling cold with the strong wind continuing to blow. Frequent wintry showers over the hills and coasts. Northern Ireland also seeing one or two rain, sleet and snow showers moving in. But for England and Wales, it's sunny skies for the vast majority as we begin the weekend. Much lighter winds and actually a fine day to come for many parts of England, Wales and then into southern and eastern Scotland. We're going to see mostly fair weather. Northern Ireland, a reasonable morning, but it turns cloudy and there'll be some lively rain and wind gusts moving in by the end of the afternoon. Meanwhile, the winds finally ease in the north of Scotland, but it stays cold and showery. Elsewhere, it's a fine winter's day, a real change compared with what we're experiencing through Friday. Now, Saturday evening does bring this weather front in the west further east, and it's going to be a gusty feature with some heavy rain for a time, perhaps some thunder. It does move through, and then on Sunday, a fine start, again a cold start, before more wind and rain move in from the southwest later.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Several motorways in Scotland remain closed as Storm Airwin makes landfall. In Falkirk, the M9 remains shut northbound off the M80 south of Stirling, and the M8 is closed westbound east of Glasgow